Recording in progress.
It is 7:05 p.m. and I'm calling the May 2nd, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded with an echo.
It's off.
Marnie, can you speak into the microphone?
So I'll begin by taking roll call. So when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Pat Norton,
Present?
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, present.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, present.
Rick Mitchell.
Present.
I don't know if Matt Hamill is present on Zoom.
He's not showing up.
Doesn't appear to be.
So Marty Crouch present, and I will note that Beth Herr is absent and Associate Member Matt Hamill are absent. So we have several things on our agenda this evening. So the first thing that I will do is just apprise Planning Board members of the status of the overlay district. So I forwarded to Attorney John Whitten a draft of an overlay district. It was approximately 15 pages in length. And John Whitten, Emil, and myself spoke at length on Saturday about this draft. And we received John Whitten's comments just this afternoon. And he had approximately 15 comments, some of which were positive and some of which questioned the inclusion of some of the provisions. I will say that we've made a lot of progress, and I'm not quite ready to distribute the draft because there are some remaining legal questions that I have and some clarifications that I need to make. And so rather than having needless confusion about something that's included that will ultimately be eliminated in the next draft, I'm hoping that we can meet with John Whitten again, and then we can circulate the draft overlay district. And what I'm thinking now, and I'd like to get responses from the planning board members, that we schedule a workshop perhaps next Tuesday. I know this is extra meetings, but a workshop so that the planning board can go through this draft. Now, that's not to say this draft is going to be complete by any means, but it's structured in such a way that certain things can just be slipped into slots. So we haven't actually discussed design standards, but hopefully some of these things can be set forth in tables, so then we can have the separate discussion about that, but we know where that will fit within the framework of this overlay district. Is John Whitten here today? Yes.
He's here.
I am. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Madam Chair.
Would you like to make any comments about what I just said? I do have some questions, and they're clarifications, nothing real major, but I just want to be sure that we're not going to engender a lot of confusion, especially on the part of the public, because once it's distributed, the public's going to see it and they'll react to it, one way or the other. But I don't want them to needlessly get concerned about something that's going to drop out based on one of your suggestions or something along those lines.
Sure. So I certainly could be prepared for next Tuesday. I have a commitment during the day. I think I can get back to my office by 7, so that shouldn't be a problem. And I would agree. I think we had a very fruitful conversation on Saturday and talked about the framework, which is what the chair is referring to. So no, Madam Chair, I'm happy to provide any additional support or commentary this evening, however you'd like to proceed.
Well, I did have a couple of questions for you. So until those are actually answered, I think it might be wise to just hold off on that. But I will say, I will summarize, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, some of the comments that you made. And
Sure.
One is we at our first exercise in going through uses, we identified perhaps more uses than we should have. And the way I'm looking at this now is that there are certain ancillary uses that we could list that would only be in existing buildings or dormitories or within buildings, not separate buildings, such as a small fitness center that was for the residents on the site, not with the intent of bringing members of the public outside of Hamilton or outside of the seminary campus onto the property. A small daycare center, those kinds of ancillary uses could be identified, but we could limit them in terms of where they're located and the square footage so that they're not predominant uses. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Hamilton has structured its zoning this way for decades, which is principal use and then accessory use. Typically, there's one principal use, but there can be multiple accessory uses. So that would apply here. And so, for example, when we talked on Saturday, it may be that the planning board and town meeting wants to encourage a coffee shop, but not a standalone Starbucks, but maybe one built into a particular building. So that would be accessory to the principal use, whatever that principal use is.
Right.
So you can have really innumerable number of accessory uses, but you can only have one principal use, or typically one principal use per lot. And if I could just add one more thing, the uniqueness of this parcel and the size of it, the board could consider multiple principal uses. You kind of already are. And I think once we kind of flesh that out, it may be worth revisiting how many principal uses, or should there be any limit on the number of principal uses? Should it be limited more by the use tables? So we can talk about that.
Right. I mean, I think that overall, the consultants identified various residential uses, townhouses and the like, as well as 55-plus housing, some type of congregate care housing, and then the user-driven uses, so to speak, of life science or office space. So those, in my mind, right now, are the principal uses, and I don't really envision more than that, except for example, Pilgrim Hall or the Retreat House. And I think with respect to those buildings, and adding to that the Gatehouse, we could also, just in words, list what uses might be acceptable there.
Yes, yep. There's really no wrong answer. As long as it's enumerated in the bylaw, that's an excellent suggestion.
So I do have a question. You've developed a 15-page bylaw, and I'm guessing it's between you and Emil and Jonathan?
No, we've been very clear. Emil and Jonathan have worked on the maps that we've had, more the
Just Jonathan.
architectural.
So it's just you?
Well, and I have spoken with Emil, but only Emil, about where to slip in his maps and design standards, and, he's a master of these Excel spreadsheets. So some of these things will slip in, just like in the senior housing bylaw, there's a chart that has the design standards, so they would just slip in. But for the most part, to your question, Rick, I have drafted this on my own. I have looked at, and if you may recall, I sent memorandum about comparing the Willow Street Overlay District, the traditional neighborhood development area, and I've been looking at a lot of different bylaws. So what I've done is amalgam of our existing bylaws, John Witten's draft, and some bylaws and provisions from other communities. So it's been a research project on my part, but I will admit to speaking with Emil about how to incorporate the substantive, well, I shouldn't say, because a lot of it's substantive, but the more the design-oriented things into this bylaw. Does that
Well,
answer your
thank you.
question?
Thank you for investing all that time. I do want to point out that it's highly unusual for one member of a seven-member board to craft a bylaw of this level of significance without any consultation from the planning board on the structure.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
frame.
That's actually not true.
The frame.
About a month ago.
Excuse me, I'd like to finish.
Right, but a month ago, I sent you a memorandum, and I had an outline, and I asked all members to send me provisions that they would like to have included in that bylaw, and I got no response from anyone.
Barney, this is not to, I'm not trying to find fault. I'm concerned that the framework and detail that you have put together could end up being a fait accompli for the planning board. In other words, you've structured the framework and evidently some significant details, and we'll be presented this framework and the details and will not have really participated in a significant way in structuring this bylaw. And so I'm afraid, my concern is this, and the public's going to have the same concern, is that it's being done by one or two or three people without a hefty amount of input from the planning board or others.
I'm going to respond to that. First off, I'll give an example. You and I worked on the
Flexible development bylaw.
and then the other thing I will say is once this draft hits your desk and hits the desks of the other members, they can tear it apart. It is, I'm not married to this. It's just, here it is. Do you like it? What do you like about it? What do you hate about it? How would you change it? It is just, it's a framework for discussion. And then I will add one final thing. It's very difficult to, for example, have a huge conversation about this draft overlay district and then also meet the deadlines that the select board wants. I mean, it's just, if we were to start from scratch as a board, trying to start with purposes and applicability and all these other provisions, it would take us weeks to try and get that all sorted out. So,
Well, that's an interesting thing you would point out is applicability and other elements.
a lot of it's boilerplate, okay?
Well, that's helpful. So maybe you could elucidate a little bit more detail exactly what you've been constructing. So, because right now, as a planning board member, I feel like I'm being kind of like blindsided and fed a framework, and this is how it's going to, and you're consulting with the attorney in great detail, and you're into design standards.
No.
Well,
They are still
I heard design standards.
No, they're going to slip in there. They're not done yet.
Excuse me.
No,
No, I
you
get it.
misheard me because
I get it.
They're-
You've
they're-
already, but hold on, Marnie. Marnie, this is not a fight. This is a discussion about how a planning board develops a bylaw in public so that we are educating not only ourselves, but we're educating the public on how we came about to do this. So this is not an attack on you, Marnie. This is a discussion the board should be having about how a bylaw is formulated in a public forum. And I just want to be careful about what we're doing here. And you've already mentioned that Emil has come up with design standards. Well,
No,
that-
he's
no,
he's
you
come up-
said that, Marnie. So
No.
please, let's have, I don't want to get into a fight with you. I think the board needs to have a discussion about how this proceeds, because right now it's a very closed process, and I don't want to lose the public on this.
Okay, could I now correct?
Rick, let me,
The design standards are, what Emil did was come up with a spreadsheet. He hasn't filled in the standards. That's
Okay, well,
going to be a
this is helpful.
topic of
This is what I'm looking for you to explain what the framework looks like.
Right. But trust me, this looks like probably every other bylaw in our zoning bylaw. It's not going to be a huge surprise
Okay,
when you look at it.
Again, this is not this is not an attack on you or what you're doing. This is more about a process and it being done in a public forum.
And I can assure you it will be.
Okay.
Does anyone else want to make any comments?
Yes, I think we ought to be indebted to Marnie and to John Whitten for coming up with some kind of draft, which we can look at and critique and fill in the details. And it's really very hard to imagine 7 people sitting around and actually writing something together. I mean, as someone who participates a lot in papers, this is like too many cooks spoil the meal. You get something in front of you, and then you modify it and adjust it. And you know, the adjustments we make and the standards that we fill in the blanks. We'll do that in public, and the public can see how we're doing it. But you know, as a draft document, it's really hard to imagine that being done by 7 people. It's just,
I would just like, I'm looking for the framework and just a discussion about what's included, what's not included, just
For
so we.
example,
I think that's, I think you'll find that that's eventually what we're going to talk about, and that's the problem of filling in the blanks.
Right. So
Or
today,
changing what's there.
We're going to revisit uses, and Emil came up with another table, but we're trying to do.
We haven't done uses yet. We've been trying to do this for the last 2 meetings.
Oh, no, we actually did go through that uses 2 meetings ago, and it was a little chaotic, so we're trying to simplify that tonight and kind of nail that down.
This was feedback from John Whitten. That's why we're revisiting this, because it was a comment on his part. But, you know, Marty also published an outline form of everything in the draft overlay a couple of meetings ago.
April 20th.
April 20. So that is the content. She said there's really nothing extraordinary in there.
Okay.
So,
But I think as of the first public meeting in a week or so, or when we start
Going public.
public, everything's going to be on the table. So we're really close, but we were really trying to move as quickly
Okay,
as possible.
Good. I mean, this is helpful. This is the kind of discussion that helps not only me, but the rest of the board know what's going on, as well as the public, and how this is going to evolve. And because this is becoming a very public process,
Yeah.
we need to know, and I mean collective need to know how this is evolving, how we
Yeah.
are involved on the planning board, and how, what are the roles and responsibilities for everybody?
right.
Believe me, we're really mindful of that, including Jonathan. All of us, all 3 of us are
Good. Okay.
mindful of that. And
Well, in that memorandum, I think it might have been April 4th. I think it's actually one of the memorandum that I did that appears on the Planning Board's webpage. I had come up with the concept that if the illustrative plans were used, then an applicant may be able to get a as-of-right development. And Attorney Whitten cautioned against that approach. He suggested that had to be altered to some extent. And so we need to work with him and figure out what exact language to use. And if we do go with illustrative plans, they have to be more detailed than the ones we have now, or if not more detailed, they have to be supplemented. And again, they have to be supplemented with more metrics, but we haven't determined what those metrics are. But he can tell us generically what we need to do, so that if an applicant were to use the illustrative plans, and remember, the illustrative plans showed a significant scale of development while preserving all the planning board preferences. So the carrot was, if you use those illustrative plans, you would be deemed to have a different permitting or an easier permitting process than if you started from scratch with a new building.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any comments?
Do we have a goalpost we're trying to hit with like a timeline which the board
Well,
would agree on a draft bylaw
Well-
with the illustrative plan that we all have? What's the date that we're trying to get that?
The date that we're trying to hit is probably early November, late October, and early November to get everything done, okay?
I mean, like, when we have to have something ready for the, because it's still a process
It's a process. I mean,
before then, we should have a alignment on.
you're going to have a draft of this overlay district
Yeah.
before hopefully our next meeting next Tuesday. And then
So I'm wondering if we need to meet next Tuesday. That's, like, I guess I'm trying to work backwards from a timeline to determine whether or not these intermittent meetings are because we're trying to hit that post earlier than we should, or,
Well, I think, didn't they say August, we would have to have something?
I thought
We would have
August.
the hearings?
No, September.
September. But there's a lot of work to be done, because
Yeah.
although the consultants did a good job, what they didn't do was they didn't ascertain what scale of development the public wants to see on that site. And if you were to ask them, they would admit it, because David Gamble admitted that to me at the second workshop.
Yeah, they were never, that scope never intended to do that.
Right. Well, regardless, it is significant, because you know, that's the seminary, in a perfect world, probably would like to see that whole campus built out, because it would be the most profitable for them. But that's probably not what the public wants.
Can I just say something,
Yeah.
just in response to your question? What's really prompting, and believe me, I don't want to be here next Tuesday either.
Yeah.
What's prompting that is the May 16 is a public, first real public forum, and where we're going to do a presentation. And this board is not ready, needs to get on board with everything.
Sure, yeah.
And so we need, unfortunately, one more meeting before going public on the 16th.
Because the okay.
That's prompting the 16th. But I don't think this is going to be every week. I hope it's
I
not.
hope not.
Could I just add?
Well, Pat brings up a good question. There was talk about having a timeline, and Jonathan Witt was going to put together a timeline. Where is that?
Well, he hasn't quite done that yet. But I think once we have our second conversation with him and nail down some of these kind of loose ends, then I think that the timeline might be easier to envision. But of course, the public is the big unknown. I mean, we'll see how much interest is.
Right. No, I get that. That's always the big unknown. I was, and it gets to Pat's question, is sort of what are the timelines, things we need to hit structurally in order to get it to the public, and how much time we have for the public discussions, and how many meetings do we anticipate during, June,
I just
July,
weigh in on-
August, and just so we have a process map so we know where we're going.
Could I just weigh in on immediate next steps? So it strikes me that immediate next steps are for the board to agree on, in a sense, the framework, the fill-in-the-blanks framework that we're going to present to the public, which is the outline bylaw that Marnie's talking about. And then, secondly, a way to talk about maximum density, a way to present it to the public and to listen to the public. And once we hear from the public and hear from the board, and there's some consensus around maximum density or intensity, that kind of sets the direction of everything. It sets the direction of the mapping, it sets the direction of the bylaw, it sets the direction of the design standards, it sets the direction of the maximum intensity, it sets everything. And from that milestone, I think we can build a more intelligent schedule of milestones. But until we get some feedback from the public.
No, I don't disagree.
So what I'm saying is the next two meetings, our workshop to prepare for the public meeting and the first public meeting is going to tell us a lot that we right now have no idea about.
Well,
and then we can map
what do you expect
forward.
the public to tell you?
We'll have a sense of how much pushback there is on various principles and various approaches. We'll have a sense.
So having been down this road many times, the public is going to need time to digest exactly what it is that's being proposed, because asking them at a public meeting, presenting them a 15-page document and expecting them to have thought carefully and come back with thoughtful, careful, rational input.
Absolutely. There's two public meetings scheduled, and
No, I get, Jonathan,
Yep,
please.
go ahead.
Please. I get what you're saying. That's the academic version of the content. I'm talking about the process. And all I'm looking for is are we planning, for example, to be meeting throughout June, July, and August for targeting, so that we have 3 months of public input? First thing that's going to come back from the public is, well, that's not fair because it's summer. And we won't, we're off in various places. But that's, that'll come. I just want to know sort of the steps so that are we then targeting, let's say, September 15th for public hearings? Or are we starting public hearings formally now? I'm just trying to get some definition and clarity on the process.
We're not starting the state mandated or the legal public hearings, the ones that are noticed in publications of general circulation. We are not doing that, but all our meetings are public. But to your point, Jonathan, and also to your point, of course the public is not going to be able to digest this overlay district. It's got a lot of legalese in it. So what was I thinking? I was thinking we can put a questionnaire together to try and suss out what people would like on this site. And that's something we should talk about at the workshop.
Right.
But so I really thought that if we do this workshop right, and we have some visuals of the type of 55-plus housing that exists, we can show people what it might look like on the site. They'll have a much better understanding of what the illustrative plans look like now. But so instead of thinking, how can they just digest this overlay district, it's really, what questions would you ask the public to find out what the scale of development they would like? So one of the questions I would have for the public, and again, you all can say I'm off base, so I was thinking about it. We have always said that we wanted to balance the social, environmental, and fiscal benefits to the town of Hamilton and the seminary for this site. So the question is, do you agree? If you do not agree, how would you rank those criteria? So questions like that.
So I think that's getting very constructive because it rather than sort of, and I'm using Rick's terms, dumping them with a 15-page and say, well,
It's going to be shorter than that, trust
no,
me.
whatever, you know what I mean.
It's going to be short.
It's a complex document.
It is.
It'll be complex even for us. So I like where you're going is I think we need to sort of ease into this because for the most part, other than the abutters, and that's probably a handful of abutters who've been paying attention to this entire process. Great job with the timeline. So we have a timeline that'll help inform, at least draw a picture that there was a very thoughtful process and public engagement and discussion on the planning board. That's good. Then the reality is this is really, as you know, it's a roadshow. And we need to figure out, as producers of this roadshow, what are the acts that we're going to put on? And I don't mean that in a facetious way. I mean, how are we going to inform the public not only on the timeline, but as you said, what are the principles? Rank those principles. What's the most important with those principles? So we try and get, at the beginning, some unanimity from the public on what they want to
All right,
see.
so-
Can I say something? May I say something?
Yeah, and then I want to get to.
Yeah, okay.
No, go ahead, though. Please respond. I want to hear it.
Yeah, my take, Rick, is I think the first thing we have to do, because from what I've heard, there's some misunderstanding or misrepresentation
Oh, I think so.
because from what I'm hearing, it doesn't make sense. So I think if the first thing we have to do, even before doing things that are constructive, although this would be constructive, is to clarify, go through the process again, and try to engage the audience, the public, as much as possible to understand what has been done. Perhaps they can clarify what actually is happening as opposed to what they may think is happening based on bad information.
Good, and this is where it gets to my timeline, because I think if we can, to the greatest degree possible, I know the public is going to drive this, is lay out a sort of timeframe so they know that this is not, the big problem was, oh, it's June 24th or June 27th, it's coming, and we have no input. I think we're going to be very clear about what are the steps we're going through over what period of time. At least we have some frame, so they go, oh, okay, so we're here at the beginning. We've got a framework to discuss. We're going to establish some principles, and we're going to work our way through this over the next 3 to 4 months. I think that'll help sort of calm things down. People will still be very passionate about very specific things, but you know, the common thing we always would hear with the bylaw, too much, too fast, too soon. And that was and so I just want people to understand and us to understand sort of the operating framework that we're working on.
My sense also, if I may, just is that we're not going to have that many meetings with the public. It's not as if it's going to be every 2 weeks going forward. I envision only a couple of meetings with them for feedback, and that's the critical thing from
I
our
would,
standpoint, because we need to
I would-
get that information soon.
I want to push back on that, Emil, that you can't have too much public involvement. Clearly, you want it structured, and you want be able to give them information
Or-
beforehand, so
I'm not
that
discouraging public involvement. I'm just saying, I don't anticipate if you want to schedule meeting every week for a couple of months
no, I'm
to
just
talk to
saying.
the public, is what I'm saying.
Look, this is a conversation for next week. And so, just to wrap this up, because I'd like to get this hard work done, is that if you all like my idea, kind of a questionnaire, and they are tricky, I know that, because I have a friend who has a PhD in sociology. Questionnaires are really hard. But if you do have some kinds of insight as to questions that can really elicit a response that we can actually sort of quantify in a way so that we can make an informed decision. So think about that.
And I've got a list.
Good. And then, and then, to your point about process, anybody who wants to do some extra work, knock yourself out. I mean, if you want to work backwards from November as to what we have to do every step of the way, I'd like to see it.
No, that's why I thought, and again, this gets to Pat's question last week, is that John Whitten and I guess you were going to try and do some framework of
Well, we will
time.
do that, but you're Mr. Critical Path, right?
Yeah, we have 9 meetings between now and October.
Okay.
Excellent.
And so
There we go. Now
let's
we have a framework.
generate an objective for each one of those
Yeah.
and determine whether or not these intermittent ones are required. And maybe also each time look back at what's the goal we're trying to achieve, because also by being, there's no project here. There's no project in front of the board. So we're making this as restrictive or, you know what I mean? And that's why I think some of the public get concerned, because we're talking about this, that, or the other thing. They don't understand we're talking about something in terms of a special permit process where the applicant still would need to come in front of the board
Oh,
and
yeah.
go through all the process that they would have to otherwise. So I think it's good that we draw lines in use to process, meaning we're not just going to allow people to go in there and blow up the site to create a certain type of use because we define it as allowed in the bylaw. You still have to go through a process. It's still got to be deemed not detrimental to the environment and impactful in any, way to the abutting neighbors and the rest of the community. I think that's sometimes difficult to translate when you're not looking at a specific project.
Right.
Which is what John said, this is why we're having so much problem here.
Yeah, well, think about it, Pat. Think about it. Think what you would do. Think of this as some kind of an engineering problem and work backwards
Yeah.
from a town meeting in early November and see what you would do. I mean, it would be a good exercise for you, and it might be helpful to us.
Yeah, I could do that.
I have a quick question. On the hearings in September, will we have what we're proposing? And
Yeah.
so we have to have the proposal
You have to
of
have a
what we
bylaw.
have.
You have to have a
Correct. I
bylaw.
just wanted to clarify that. So
Wait.
that's something we'd have to have before we start the hearings in September.
We would want something as close to final as possible. I mean, obviously, if some member of the public came out of the woodwork with a profound observation, we would never want to say, no, we don't want to hear from you. But what we want to have at those public hearings that are mandated by Chapter 40A is something that's likely to be in its almost final form.
Right, so they're reacting before town meeting. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Did I say that correctly, John?
John left.
Oh, he left. Okay, well, you have to take my word for it.
Well,
Mass
he's
General
back.
laws.
No, I'm right here. I dropped the file. That you did say that correctly. 48 Section 6 or Section 5 is the public hearing requirement.
Right.
And if I could answer, I think it was Rick's comment about the schedule. You know, the schedule relative to the statute is really straightforward. You just have to have a public hearing before town meeting. You can literally hold it the night before. Not that you would, but that is the only requirement in terms of the statute. Public hearing, advertised 14 days prior to the hearing. So in terms of the schedule, it's really the board schedule and the select board schedule working on the development agreement. The statutory schedule is really, really easy. So that shouldn't be in the way. It's really up to the two boards to set the schedule for public input. Because the draft, I can respond to the board's drafts quickly and turn them around quickly, but I think it's the board's determination of what those public information sessions are going to be that's going to dictate the schedule.
Right, and you know, I'm taking this a little bit out of order, but one thing that is hampering me is the absence of information about the development agreement. And I think I went on a tear at one of our joint meetings where I listed all the unknowns that had to be addressed by this development agreement. And this came up in our conversation with John Whitten, and this is the whole issue of the infrastructure, and in particular, the wastewater treatment center. And I took the liberty of calling David Smith and getting as much information as I could from our chair of the Board of Health. But, John, you said this. I mean, that septic system is under the jurisdiction of the DEP. It can only have one operator. So how this site is organized is critical, because a condominium association cannot manage that septic system. And so how do different developers buying different portions of the site over time pay for that system? The existing system, the need to expand the system, or the need to do a whole new system? So all of these questions still are outstanding in my mind. We've heard nothing from the Select Board about their progress answering questions relative to the development agreement, and we haven't seen an outline of what's going to be in it, and we haven't seen a draft of what it contains. But I can tell you this zoning bylaw will go nowhere without the development agreement, and vice versa. I mean, they are inextricably bound. One it serves the other. And so we need some significant information about that development agreement, and we have yet to receive it. Does anyone want to comment about that? Because I have it in the timeline as exhibits, a series of questions to the Select Board and to Attorney Whitten, and these were all pertinent to the negotiation of this development agreement. And the list was long and it was important. And to date, radio silence.
Is this where we want to go with the agenda right now?
Well, she wants an
Sure. I
answer
mean,
to
we
a question.
You know, if you have something pertinent to that, I took it out of order. I was going to
Okay.
talk about that last, but you know, since it's out there, let's get it out of our hair,
Well,
so to speak.
there's many, the septic system is the largest sort of elephant in the room, but
right.
there's another herd behind that. So, and it's really hard to do the mapping. I'm sure it's hard to do the outline of the bylaw without at least, I've said this before, at least a table of contents of what's in the development agreement. We don't need to know the details, we just need to know the table of contents, so to speak. What are the subjects that are going to be covered in it? That would really help the planning board. Maybe I'll just leave it at that, because I've already mentioned that there's sidewalks, there's street lights, there's everything that isn't in a zone is a
Right,
problem.
right.
Everything that's not in a specific zone or a specific development is a problem here, of which the septic system is the biggest problem. but, not to mention sidewalks and lighting and maintenance and roads and whatnot. So we really need something to look at and push against so that we can frame the mapping and the zones, buffer zones,
I think that's an excellent point.
so just a list.
But I'm thinking that this is why we have John Witten, as this coalesces into a bylaw, that John has significant background expertise and experience to say, well, for example, the septic system, there has to be a legal mechanism for responsibility for maintaining, expanding, whatever it is. This isn't the first rodeo in the country where this has happened. So I have no problem allowing John Witten, and clearly the Board of Selectmen is going to defer to John Witten as well, because they're not involved in writing the bylaw, and they're not involved in the day-to-day development of a development agreement. So that's a problem I want to give to John and say, John, here's what the outline looks like. Here are the uses, dimensions, protections, systems. You figure out how to make it work within the context of this bylaw, and vice versa.
So a suggestion that I'd like to make is that we make kind of our best pass at a formal list of those questions that don't fit neatly in either a bylaw or a map. So I'd welcome all to submit to the chair, and then we submit that to John Witten.
Madam Chair, could I just make a comment about the development agreement? The problem that we're all facing collectively is the obvious. We don't have a developer, we don't have a project in mind. So we're crafting a bylaw based on what could happen. The same is true with the development agreement. But the beauty of the development agreement is we could presume any development and include conditions in the development agreement that would be applicable. So I'm just going to throw this out as an example. It's above my pay grade, but in terms of what the details are. But for example, conservation restriction on the wetland on the lower portion of the site, a perimeter buffer of X 100 feet with a restriction in terms of a no-touch, no disturbance zone. So those kind of, they're applicable to any development, are easy for the development agreement. A prohibition on wind turbines, a prohibition on additional antenna, a prohibition on things that everybody would agree, or most people would agree, shouldn't be allowed. That could be the subject of a development agreement. But the nitty-gritty of the development agreement, for example, the septic system or the wastewater treatment plant, becomes almost impossible without a project. And where I'm going is some things are going to have to be left to the permitting process. And I think wastewater disposal is probably one of those. For example, I have no idea what the capacity of the existing treatment plant is or what DEP approved in terms of groundwater discharge. But I am going to guess it's a lot lower than the maximum build out that we're talking about for the site. So that means the treatment plant has to be upgraded, or a new plant has to be built, or additional plants need to be built to keep them part of the particular development. As the chair was saying, you can't have cross registration of access to a wastewater treatment plant unless DEP approves it. So I don't think we're able to figure out in the development agreement, and certainly not in zoning, how to deal with the wastewater disposal issue. That's going to be the applicant's problem, and we're presuming it's going to be their problem. I think what we're all concerned about is, what if they can't meet the minimum criteria of wastewater disposal? Have we all just wasted a lot of time? And that's entirely possible. So we're crafting both the development agreement and the zoning bylaw with an assumption of what might happen. I think some things we're just going to have to leave to the particular development and the regulatory process.
Could I just
To me.
let me
Go
just
ahead.
try here. Okay, what might help us, I understand that you can't put any of those specifics in because there's no developer, there's no specific development agreement at this point. But what could be beneficial to the board is an example or a boilerplate template of how those subjects might be handled In other words,
Oh,
just
sure.
to see a few
Sure.
sentences.
I mean, I can send that to Patrick probably while we're talking.
That would be
Absolutely.
perfect. And
The
that would
only,
cover-
Jonathan, it's a fair question, and I think the board has an example or a couple examples I sent from way back when. But the way to think about it would be a contract. That this is a contract between two parties, and the two parties are giving up a little bit each. What the town is giving up is we're crafting a zoning bylaw that's going to go to town meeting for approval. What the applicant, the landowner, is giving up is, and that's where we have to fill in the blank. But for example, one of the things that I think they'd be willing to give up without much pressure is no wind turbines, no external cell towers, just as two examples. So the contract format is legalese, it's just a contract. The detail is really where I think we're all struggling. But I'm certainly happy to provide the board with a ton of examples contractually. But the detail, I think we're kind of creating from whole cloth here.
So maybe it's a two-way street here. If you could provide us with some more examples that are relatively specific, and we know that they won't be specific to our project, but they have offer enough details so we get the contours of how it's handled. You know, what
Absolutely.
the entity might be who might control the septic system. And then I think on our end, we could do some homework. And just to repeat what I said before, I'd suggest that all the members of the board just submit whatever questions they would have of things that wouldn't likely fit neatly into zoning and would need to be in development agreement. And let's just build a list of
Actually,
these are the things that we need.
that's
we've
been
got
done.
Well, you've got a list of questions for the of broad questions around the development agreement, but there's also some more specific questions around additional infrastructure questions on the zoning. And I think we
Right.
could just flesh it out.
Right,
And then
and
submit it.
I'm still struggling with that because I just don't, it seems hard for me to fathom that if there are multiple owners on this property, they have to have some mechanism of allocating their rights and responsibilities.
Like, what is the entity? If it's not a condominium association, what is the entity that
Well,
manages the septic?
exactly, but I mean, it's not just the septic, but it's mowing the lawns and
Right.
all these other
But is it,
areas and.
I guess I wonder if, we're talking about a lot about the septic. In its current use, the month of March, they were compliant, and it was just slightly less than half the capacity of the system. But the permit is governed by the DE. I don't know if it's something we should take on as part of the zone. It's already a permitted process. It's the applicant's responsibility it's a DEP approval process to tie in a new upstream development. So I don't know if it's our responsibility to say how they do that, it's a DEP, it's only if, it's, I guess anything less than 10,000 gallons a day is our responsibility. But
Right.
anything above that is,
Again, I don't want to get lost solely on the septic system.
Yeah.
It's all
I would like to.
it's all infrastructure that falls outside of a development area. That's all.
yeah.
And there's lots of it.
So I'm wondering, John, if in putting the development agreement together, you can note where there is that ambiguity that you specifically call out in the development agreement to be determined based on the proposed development. My concern here is that 10 years from now, if the use changes and we're not here, there's some institutional contractual language that instructs a board of neophytes that haven't been down this road as to what exactly they need to do in order to make that particular application legal and functional.
I like that example. That's a great example.
So it's an important kind of point here. The development agreement, it's a contract. It binds the developer and their successors and assigns. It prohibits them or their successors from doing certain things. It is more negative than it is positive, other than perhaps opening some of the site for public access. The issue on the septic system or the groundwater discharge permit or further groundwater discharge permits is so tailored to the particular project that I don't know, and I'm not giving up the ship here, but I don't think we can craft a development agreement that could anticipate that kind of permitting requirement. And I don't think we should worry about it because over 10K, it's DEP, groundwater discharge permit. Under 10,000, it's the Board of Health. So it's going to be triggering either local Board of Health regs or DEP, the groundwater discharge permit program, where they'll take care of at least the technical aspects of wastewater disposal. So I don't think we need to worry about it. And I had made one of the comments on the chair's draft, the state building code. No, the project has to comply with the state building code. You don't have to put that in zoning. Same thing with Title V or the groundwater discharge permit program. The project that ends up being used that follows zoning would be precluded from doing certain things by the development agreement, but it would also require to get any necessary other permits. There might be a MEPA trigger. There could be all sorts of other permits well above what we need to codify in the bylaw or the development agreement.
You know, in conversations, it's clear to me that corporate use of the upper campus doesn't want to have anything to do with the septic system below. They don't want to share a septic system with a bunch of residential uses. So it's almost like you could make that part of the bylaw that, or the developer agreement, that whatever use occurs on the upper campus is going to have to come up with a disposal system of its own. And by separating the two, you give a lot of extra capacity to the system that's there now to handle the extra residential development in the middle campus. So that's kind of, and it's any use on the upper campus is not going to want to tie into, and so tie into the system on the lower campus. And I think, you know, somehow, I mean, you're right in the sense that caveat emptor, you know, they're going to buy it and realize that themselves, but it might almost be useful to somehow, at the get-go, say, look, you know, for this to fly, we're going to have two separate disposal systems, one for the lower and mid campus and the other for the upper. And there has to be a question of, is there a site for the upper one? I've seen, I mean, people have drawn little squares on a map, and I've looked at the site and said, I actually think there's a lot of ledge there. So I have no idea where that anybody's done any serious research about whether it's actually possible to get a separate system for the upper campus. But I think there'll have to be one.
So shall we move on to the uses?
I think we should. And we can talk about this, you know, a little in more detail later. But I do have some concerns about that, because I think these questions, they may actually be, in some sense, academic, but I think they affect how this property is marketed. I think people will want to know what they're getting into. You know, they want to know the capacity of that septic system. It was built in 1978. The consultants recognized that the boilers are old. I mean, so there are issues there, and so, you know, how much are you going to pay to buy trouble? I mean, so these are practical questions as well as legal questions. Okay, let's go to uses. Emil?
A couple of weeks ago, we went through uses, and I have this sheet of paper that was dated April 20, where we put X's on the, we went down through each district. If you look at the top of that sheet, they were from left to right, Browns Hill, right through their natural area, color-coded. So there were 8 columns of districts. And then on the left-hand side, we had the industry and processing, recreation, education, and so forth. And we went through the process of putting those that, making a mark in a box, checking it, saying, yeah, this is a use that I could see in this particular district for this particular use, so we put an X. In talking a bit with John Witten, he could use, this use is very important to his doing his work at this stage, but he would like it at a slightly different level, beyond the just identifying possible uses, maybe even ranking them 1, 2, or 3. So I put together the spreadsheet that you see that just came out today, the Browns Hill Overlay District use chart. What I did was take the X's we made for each one of these districts. The first page is the Browns Hill one. So if you look at all of those uses on the left-hand side, they should correspond to all the X's that we put as a board on that Browns Hill commercial residential column. So that information is not gone that we worked on, but now we're being asked to consider, are there any here that would be as of right, permission as of right, permitted use? And then number 2 and then number 3, with number 2 being something a little more difficult perhaps to, or a little heavier lift, and then 3 being the most heavy lift to get approval for that. Rick?
So, what I'm trying to do is understand the key here. Is a P a by right use? Is a 1, 2, and 3 then gradations of special permit?
Permitted use, and John, you can correct me, would be considered to be as of right, unless specified to some other degree, permitted with, not permitted without an approval, for example. I mean, you can get permission with approval.
Site plan approval.
Site plan approval or other approval, right?
So I think the coding we've kicked around, you've used before, is P is permitted, site plan review is required regardless, SP permitted by special permit, and that's it. Don't list out prohibited uses. If it's not included, it's prohibited. So it's a P or an SP, and in my experience, that's the better way of doing it. Don't try and list out prohibited uses.
So just,
Well, could you forward, if you have it handy electronically, could you email me the document you're referring to?
Yeah, can you do it?
and
Or-
while you're doing that, just
Do I have it electronically
It came in the mail today, in the email today.
today?
just
Thank you.
clarification question. I get the permitted uses would be site plan, by right with site plan review. And then I'm guessing 1, 2, and 3 would be special permit gradations. Is that, am I interpreting that
Or it's 1.
Well,
correct?
P would be the number 1, that would be permitted use. And again, John, that's as of right?
So number,
So the number 1
Is as of right.
as of right, okay. So then 2 and 3 you would assume are some gradation of a special permit.
Right, and
Yes.
so think about this. So, as you may recall, John often talked about their special permit light and
I know,
special permit
right,
heavy.
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Right, so 2, for example, could be for an applicant who elected to use the illustrative plans as they're going to be, revised and whatnot. So an applicant comes in, they see the illustrative plans, and they say, wow, that looks good to me. So they go through the application process, and if you use the illustrative plans, it's essentially a deemed compliance with those provisions that appear in a number of our bylaws, but they essentially mimic or mirror what's in the infamous 8.1.12 of the senior housing bylaw. But so the use of the illustrative plans would permit someone to eliminate that step. They wouldn't have to show compliance with that because the illustrative plans already do that.
Can we go
Okay,
through?
this
so I'm just
is
saying-
terrific.
So 2 would be
terrific.
special permit light, and 3 would be your just regular
Right.
special permit.
And so what we should do is we should fill this out.
8.
We should fill this out and tabulate it up.
Who?
We should each of the board members should fill this out, and we'll tabulate it up.
Tabulate it up.
Yeah,
What is that
how many
tab?
out of 7 people felt this about that?
No,
And you were wanting a way for the board to express its preferences, and here it is. We just need to fill it out.
So,
And if you leave it blank, it means you don't want that use at all.
No, well, okay, I was going to say if you don't want that use at all, you should check at 3, but I guess if you leave it blank, you don't want it at all.
At all.
Okay.
so why don't we go through one as an example so
Yeah.
that the board understands how this table is.
Sure, commercial recreation facility, big commercial gym. Now, if you put 1, you want somebody to be able to come in by right, subject to a little site plan review, but be able to construct, what's the one, Blink? You know, a big Blink facility in the buildings that are. If you give it a 2, you're kind of like more skeptical. 3, that's really, and if you leave it blank, no go.
Let's do an example,
You
so.
only get one box you can check. You can't check more than one.
Right. You have to choose.
I get it. That's why I'm saying, let's do an example so
Okay.
that we walk through one, so we
Right.
all understand what our,
And
Okay,
actually-
let's look at the first one and have everybody say how they're going to grade, I guess would be the way to think about it, commercial recreational facility.
excellent point. My question is, are we putting a number, an X, a
No, no, you're just choosing 1, 2, 3, or blank.
I
1,
know,
2, 3.
there's
We-
3 columns. What do I do with those 3 columns? Do I put SP in 1?
No, you just check.
3 is.
1 means by right. 2, if you just put a check in it.
So we're
One is,
checking. We're
one is the
just checking.
strongest, 3 is the
Hey,
least.
I'm not the
strong.
brightest bulb in the tree, so I need a lot of help here.
Right.
Okay, so 1 is as of right, 2 is special permit light, and 3 is special permit, right?
And blank is
No.
no,
Okay,
prohibited.
let me start on that. Let's start right at the top and go right through this quickly. Commercial recreational facility, 1, 2, or 3.
Can I just make reference to the zone you're talking about?
Okay.
So I put the zone up on the board.
I was at Browns Hill, I'm
It's
sorry.
it's the very, very good.
Browns
Yep.
Hill, it's the-
Just want to make sure everyone's looking at the same
there.
area.
It's
Correct.
all
I
those.
wonder if this process is done by each independent zone separately, or
Well,
it's part of the whole.
start off doing
Okay.
that. I mean, I understand some of these things would,
Because if you permit use everything.
conflict with each other.
Yeah.
You couldn't do this here and that
Right,
there.
right.
I understand that, but let's just
Do this.
let's take it as it is.
John, I emailed, did you get the chart, John?
I did, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Go around the table.
So
All you have to do is
walk
choose.
us through.
Okay. Again, I don't know if we can split screen, get the chart there so the
You
public
want
can
the
watch it.
charts more probably
As,
visual to see anyways.
well, we can start anyway. So at the top, recreation, education, and public assembly.
Rick, you're up. We'll go counterclockwise.
Are we
Commercial
talking
recreational
recreational
facility, 1, 2, or 3,
Or blank.
or blank?
or blank,
Blank.
okay?
Beth?
I'm thinking of 3. But I also think,
Mark your own, though, so we
Okay,
can
yeah.
tabulate them.
but I also think there's something to be said for having conversation about why people are choosing what they are.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, I understand what
Maybe
you're saying, you want everybody to do it.
let's do the tabulation first, because if there's a lot of unanimity about something, nobody wants this, then we really don't need to have a conversation. If there's, some people want it, some people don't,
Yeah.
then we need to have a conversation.
Okay.
Perfect.
So you think maybe you would want it. I would say no, because it would generate a considerable amount of traffic, probably early in the morning and later in the evening, and I don't think that would be the best use
So
of the site.
Right.
I'm putting an N next to it.
All right.
Okay, and instead of blank.
Right.
Okay.
I would say N as well on that, for the reasons given.
I would say N.
And
Also agree, N.
Okay, no conversation.
I thought I know, the reason why I put a 3 was I thought we had already discussed this and we said we would, that's what was on the list.
It
Well, we
was on the
can,
list, but
We're
I
refining
think,
it now.
we're refining. it.
We're
I think
refining.
we-
I thought we had said that was a yes before.
no, I
No,
think
what
it
we
was-
did is,
it was a no.
I think we put the things on this list that we wanted to consider.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, but how we consider them, what the answer is, not true.
Got it.
Okay.
Next item is conference/convention facility.
N for me.
Beth,
I think I'm gonna go for a 3 on that one.
Marnie,
It's an N for me, no.
I would say for convention, it would be an N.
Well, I would say an N, except that MIT and a lot of universities have these conference facilities that are not, they're pretty innocuous. They, you know, a conference is 100 people, 200 people. They only get a conference, you know, once every other week.
Yeah.
It's just, I'd certainly give it a 3, if not an N. So let me give it a 3.
Okay.
I'd concur with Bill if you put a cap on the size of it. So,
Yeah, something like that.
building size would be-
yeah,
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 3.
capacity, occupancy
Yeah,
size.
3. Gotta be.
Special permit process, number,
Yep.
yeah, the 3.
So we have,
We have 4 3s and
4
3
3s
Ns.
and 2 Ns.
let's
So-
go with a 3.
All right, 3 is what it is.
This is working very well.
But also low utility and infrastructure users.
Yeah.
Right.
Next item, and Beth, you can start off, fitness/health facility.
Isn't that what we were saying with the commercial recreational? So is this a facility that is for outside people or for people, for
It
a
would be
company
part,
that buys a place and they want to have a health facility in
I
there?
think we decided it would not be a freestanding facility, but necessarily, but maybe an
A
internal.
corporate.
Accessory, you might say.
Yeah, a company has a thing and
Accessory.
they want to have a gym.
So why don't we write accessory next to it and then
Accessory.
rank it that way? Yes?
All right.
I think it might.
Okay, so we need to vote on that.
Yeah, Beth,
Well, could I just make a statement, though? If it's an accessory use, I think that we should specify those separately, because, so we've
Well,
eliminated
I mean, imagine, I guess it would be, you know, some big corporations up there and they want to have,
a little gym for
you
their
know, a
employees.
gym and
That's what we said.
We can reorganize the list.
Yeah,
We can
so I was-
reorganize the list after we
just make it
rank
Right,
it.
so I think we agree it's an accessory use, and what I
Yeah.
was thinking is we'd then make a list of accessory uses,
Yeah.
and then discuss a square footage of what
Right.
would be permissible, so that they were not open to the general public, but were really for the benefit
Of
of
their employees.
of
Agreed.
employees.
Yeah.
So, okay, accessory.
I put a 2.
I don't think we have to worry about that. If it's an
Okay.
accessory use,
Okay, I thought Bill was asking us.
it would follow the underlying
Okay,
use.
That's right.
So if the underlying use was, say, for a conference center, the
Right.
accessory use, not that you would have it for a conference center, but the accessory use would follow the main
The permit
use.
process, yeah.
okay, then we have library, museum, art gallery. Marnie, you want to go first?
I would give that a 3.
Yeah, I'd give that a 3 as well.
a 3?
Jonathan?
3, but I'd want a cap on it.
Yeah,
Also, special permit, 3.
Yep.
3.
I would actually give it a 2. It's culture. It's not a lot of crowds. I might give it a 2.
All right. Rick?
I'd say I'll give it a 2 as well.
Yeah, I was not 2.
They tend to have appreciable space given to them, and you typically don't have a lot of people
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
What is the nuance between a 2 and a 3? What is the
I'm
permitting?
hoping the nuance between the 2 and the 3 is the 2 follows the illustrative plans as,
Well,
So we have to
with
Well,
supplemented
no.
with more metrics.
No.
no, I think in this case, the site plan review, you can't deny it. You can only condition it in a review. Whereas special permit, you can either deny or approve.
So you can go light and you can still deny it.
Yeah,
So that's why I said 2.
yeah.
So that might not be just site plan review on 2, is that what we're saying?
2,
It's
anything
only
that's,
site plan
anything above a 1 is a special permit.
Okay.
Well, 2 though, Rick, you can condition it, but you can't deny it.
Oh, 2 you can.
No, 2 is a special permit.
It's a special permit. Yeah.
3 is a
Yeah,
special
and
permit.
I think we should clarify this. So if it's a use by right, then the board can require site plan review. I don't mean to be cynical, but it's the analogy is it's the deck chairs on the Titanic. You're moving things around, but you can't deny it. If it's a special permit,
This is special.
a light special permit, you still have to approve it, or you can approve it with conditions, but you can deny if it doesn't
That's why-
meet these
that's what I'm
easy to
saying.
Okay.
meet
In my
standards.
world,
Was my error then,
Right.
I think, yeah.
So
okay.
1
If
is
it's-
a
Let me just finish this thought. If it's under the way the board's discussing this, if it's a 3, then you're making it more difficult. And the way to make it more difficult is to make it or include more subjective criteria.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a 2, more objective criteria, because you want them to be able to meet it objectively. But if it's a 3, you're concerned about subjective impacts. So that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Can I take a stab at answering Pat's question, which is, one possible way to differentiate between a 2 and a 3 is with the design standards.
Yeah,
Yes. Yep. Because they are, one will be much more objective than the other. If it's form-based code, then it's starting to look like it's a 1, maybe a 2. But if it's subjective in terms of design or aesthetics or views and vistas, then you want to hold on to that discretion, and that's what makes it more of a 3.
thank you very much. The next item is meeting facility.
What's the difference between that and convention center?
I'm assuming when we're looking at these we're thinking at first blush, these are standalone facilities.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I would say probably a 2, but as an accessory use to a new or existing building,
For which one?
or meeting.
Oh,
Meeting facility.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that would, it works as an accessory use. So if you had condominiums, you could have
Right.
a big meeting room.
Or the,
Boardroom.
aging in place.
Right, exactly,
A
yes.
museum could even have a meeting room that they
Yeah.
could use or rent out, or
Okay, Bill, Bill, why don't you go?
I would give it a 2.
Jonathan?
2.
Pat?
Also 2.
And Rick, you said 2. Beth?
2.
Marnie?
See, I'm struggling with this, because I think with the accessory uses, whatever permitting is required for the principal use, the accessory use
Fall under it,
would fall under it.
right.
So we don't have to
So,
give it. If
so
we-
you could actually just say, rather than enumerating it, just say accessory only.
Exactly, that's what I'm doing. So I look at this as accessory, and we don't have to actually give it a grade.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Emil?
Okay, I'd give it a 2. We'll talk about that. Next item is park playground. Jonathan? You wanna-
2.
Well, again, this is one of those accessory uses. It's like,
Thinking this, yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
Oh.
it's like if it's townhouses and they want to have a small park, I'm all for it.
And remember, it's still going to be subject to site plan review. So if you want,
the
you want
principal building.
to, even as a principal use, somebody wanted to run something, you say, all right, you can have a playground here, but
Well, we haven't determined that yet because we haven't got to housing.
Okay.
So
It's not part of a building, though. It's, it's on the grounds.
that's what I'm saying
Use,
is
yeah.
it's an accessory to whatever you are allowing for use, whether it be commercial or residential.
Right, but Emil's right, that would not be within a building.
No, it wouldn't.
So we probably would have to review it.
That's a separate use within
Yeah.
the site
It's
or
a
the
separate use,
district.
yeah.
So wouldn't it be an accessory to that building?
All districts are not residential. All districts are not exclusively residential or one thing or another. They're combinations. So a park or a playground would be an independent activity in the district, not associated with a particular building.
It
is what
could be, or it could not be.
Well,
Right.
you could have a park in a building, I guess.
No, no, no. What I'm saying is, let's say it's divided into the three zones, and in one zone, for whatever reason, they want to have a small park or a playground for residents or employees. That would be accessory to that use, right?
It's an
This-
accessory.
In
I
other
think
words,
when-
This,
Say a child.
somebody isn't just going to show up and say, hey, I'm buying the property and I'm building a playground. They're going to do something with that land. They're going to build something.
Well, for
And they may
example-
say it as an amenity, I want to have a playground because this is building housing for families.
this would be a case where you could have a civic place like a town green that shows up on one of the schemes.
Right.
Nobody's going to build that except the contractor, the developer.
Right.
It's not owned by a house or a building. So it is open to the general public in that neighborhood.
Yes, within that zone.
So is that permitted or not permitted? But you wouldn't make it accessory to what?
To that specific development.
But Emil's talking about, like,
No,
if
no.
it's on a town green, it's on
We're
non-specifically
not talking about a
developed.
town green. We're
Well,
talking
that's a
about.
civic space. That could be a park, it could be a playground. That's what we're talking about. It's not a built-on area, it is a specific park.
We should define accessory. That's the problem that we're
Yeah.
coming.
I think we ought to just treat
Let's
each
finish
one.
with the voting, and then these are things we can discuss
Yeah,
next
but
week.
I think, if we think of accessory as something that's within a building, that,
That was the original intention, I guess,
Oh.
doing something.
it's something within the building.
The objection to having a
What can't-
freestanding.
John, hey, John? Are you there?
Yep, right here.
Can you have an accessory use outside a structure?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, think agricultural uses. Yeah, you can have accessory structure, accessory use outside of the principal structure. Yeah.
Community
Okay.
gardens, things like that.
So that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
It's
all right.
only accessory to that structure, or,
Use. The only suggestion would be it should be an accessory. It could be an accessory structure, but it has to be accessory to a use.
yes,
That-
exactly.
And just one more thought on that. It's accessory to the use. There could be multiple accessory uses, but there can only be one principal use. And I think that, as we were talking earlier, that's an important piece here because that's the presumption. But we're talking about a different approach where there could be multiple principal uses.
So I'm going to say.
So you could
accessory-
have park and playground would be part of all of these then, residential, services, retail,
It could serve all of them.
would serve all of them, I guess.
Right, and,
All of those uses.
right.
So they're not specific to one use, they're,
But they would be specific to one
We're- yes.
project.
So we'll sort
Be
that
one
out.
development that
We'll sort-
develops the use, the accessory.
We'll sort that out.
Why don't we just, circle back to that
Yeah.
later?
all right. Studio, art, dance, martial arts, music. Pat, you want to start?
I would say, same as the conference or conventional facility. I would say that's a special permit.
So is that a 2 or a 3?
That's a 3, sorry.
I would agree with that.
The
Bill?
reason I say it is because Bosoma is growing, and both my daughters are dancing, and they want to move out of Hamilton because there's no space.
Rick?
I'm going to go 2.
Beth?
2.
Marnie?
3.
I'd say 3 as well. And Bill? You said, Bill?
I was the 3.
3?
And you missed me. 3.
3.
The 3s have it. Trail,
Accessory.
Well, no, and then that gets to the continuity of the entire piece of property. So I'd say by right. You can have a trail by right,
Yeah.
as long as it, with conditions.
yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Is that the current trails or is that adding trails?
Either
Either one.
way,
Okay.
it's a good thing.
So Rick, you go first. You're 1?
I'm a 1.
I'll do 1.
I do 1.
Trying to think of a way there's a trail that could be abused.
I thought that the trails or things like that we wanted to preserve on the campus were part of the development agreement.
We're hoping
Have
that
to be
would
allowed
be
as
the
it-
case.
This would be a new trail.
Right, but if a
still have to allow it in
developer
zoning.
builds a specific use in a specific zone, and they propose to connect to the existing protected development agreement trails, you want them to do that.
Yeah.
This is a good thing all the way around. This pedestrian mobility, connectivity, wayfinding, ability to go from parking to activities,
Yeah.
on-site, off-site. You don't want to get in the way of that.
I'll vote for one, Bill.
Trail, one.
Jonathan?
One.
And Pat?
One.
Okay, great.
We got through one category.
Residential, multifamily,
Can I make one question here?
Yeah.
Clustered single-family is not an option.
well,
Sure it is.
Where?
we,
Multifamily, townhouses are attached, apartments, condos, there's no mixed use, no. There's no single-family housing
well, they're all
option.
sort of clustered together, I mean, compact.
Yeah, but that's not, I'm just saying,
They're
the
different
wording
Oh,
here,
good, it's a good point.
the wording here excludes single-family.
Yes, it does, because it's not specifically called out as
Well, it's-
what John says.
Yeah, it is, there is detached houses, 1 and 2 family, not on Browns Hill, though. The thought was on Browns Hill, maybe you would not want single-family housing on top of Browns Hill.
You could have it if it was really tightly clustered. That might be,
So we
I
can't
mean, they
add
could
it.
be duplexes, but I don't know.
Like 55-plus housing.
55 plus, they might want, single-family clustered.
No, I.
We could
I-
add
I-
that.
That's a very good catch there, Bill. I personally, before we vote on it, I would exclude it, because that's the whole point of this, is to use
Yeah,
the land wisely, and single-family homes are going to chew up land.
that's the problem with even compact.
Townhouses are individually owned, but they're not, actually, a townhouse is a single family. There's single-family
They're all
detached,
attached.
single-family
They're all attached.
attached. The townhouse is just, it might
Word.
cover that.
It's another word for the kind of the same thing.
Say again?
It's a kind of another word for the same thing.
Which is?
Townhouse or attached single family. It's just
Yeah,
there's no
yes,
detached.
a townhouse is an attached single family.
Yes, there's just no detached single family in
Right.
this category.
Right.
And the question is,
Should we?
should we?
Yeah.
I'll go first.
Do we want to include 55-plus, though, as a separate use?
This is just
Because
structure.
it's
at this
broad
point.
enough, it doesn't exclude it.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Jonathan?
I say no, single family.
What a
So,
single family, so you would.
Right. I would say
So you
no.
would say N in this.
so.
Well, in other words,
Are you,
the question was, should we add it? And
Should we add it?
And I'm
Oh, I see.
answering that
Oh.
question.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
okay, so the answer is no.
My answer is no.
Okay.
I'd love to hear other answers.
I would agree, that was the reason it was taken off.
Yeah, 'cause it's
Because we
not
don't
here.
want to encourage it there. There's some places you do want to, like the lower part, you would encourage it.
Yeah, there's little pockets that fits nicely in the lower campus, like especially the north central.
All right, let's go back to the top.
Dwelling, multifamily,
But everybody didn't get a chance to weigh in on that.
okay. Any
Three
other-
people said no.
Beth, we're talking about
Yeah.
yes or no to dwellings that
I
are,
mean, they'd have to take down all the
Detached.
current structures, right? I mean, how would?
Well, they do that for any residential, right? They would, for any of these, they're going to bulldoze.
Okay, so this isn't, when we're talking about these dwellings, so I'm gonna say no on the single family, but, so these dwellings, this is, and the apartments, condos, that none of those would be using the current structure?
They could if they could figure it out.
they could figure it out. yeah.
Because
can't
I might feel, I know, I might feel
It's-
different
Don't,
about.
don't.
It's a different
you're-
question.
You're confusing yourself.
Okay,
We're
thank you.
talking single-family only here. Don't go anywhere else. We're saying no single-family.
Right.
We'll move on to the next
Okay,
one.
That's my, well, I'm moving into the next question of like, but, you know,
Marty, do
No.
you have an
Yeah.
opinion?
Well, I don't know if we need to, and I just throw this out, distinguish between reuse of existing structures versus.
This is just
We don't have-
single-family
This is
question.
use, this is only
I'm
use.
Okay.
Whether we should add a missing entry into this
Oh, no,
list.
no.
You want to
no,
allow
no.
single-family house in a structure on top.
Words not in
No,
here,
no,
should we
I
add that
thought we
word?
answered that. I thought we
No,
were
I
past
wanted to hear from all board members. I
Pat?
started by saying no. Two other people said no. I'd love to hear the rest of the board
Thank you.
say no.
We're
Yeah.
good. Let's move on.
Bill, you're,
Well, Bill-
Well, I said yes.
Bill said yes, so.
I would say if we're considering these other three that are on the top of this list, we should include that. Because I don't differentiate between them, and I would say they're all
No.
special permit.
So four, what do we have?
3.
5 no's
Oh, we
and
have-
2 yeses?
yeah, 2 yeses, yeah. So it's a no.
Okay. I just wanted to finish that process.
Okay. Dwelling, multifamily. One reason it's not just residential, it's that these are particular building types. You know, multifamily townhouses are a particular type, apartments tend to be higher or mid-rise. That they all represent individual building types that are going to help organize the site. That's why there are so many. It's not just, do you want residential uses on
So
top?
would we do by right, if they use the current building, because there are apartments in the current building, or I just?
No, we're on Browns Hill.
If I make a single-family
They
house,
have,
This
they
is,
have,
no.
blends in with a
They have
duplex here and
apartments
so
up
on,
in
so
Brownsville.
it's just a little bigger,
In Kerr Hall.
Yeah.
There are apartments in Kerr Hall.
not relative
Yes.
to townhouses.
I stand corrected then.
You can have a townhouse like this,
Penny.
okay, and I can put a single-family house
I'm
on
not
it and put the same
I don't
amount
know
of
if
land
there's much
around it.
apartment as a
Doesn't make
room,
any
and I
difference.
think they might have joint, it's more like a dorm
Okay.
kind of situation.
I'm wrong.
Necessarily agree.
So that's why I was
I'm s-
wondering.
Sorry,
No, not a problem.
withdraw my objection. So where are we?
We're multifamily.
So Beth, did you,
On the multifamily, I would, that would
But
be,
I'm just, again, this is the typology. What's the difference between multifamily and apartments and condos? I understand multifamily is different than townhouses. Townhouses are individually owned and have a common wall. Apartments are in a building, there are more stories, I understand that. What's multifamily distinct from townhouses and apartments?
I usually think of like a 2 or 3 family for a multifamily.
Well-
It doesn't mean that it's limited, but.
I know what I've done is put together a whole list of, of uses by building type. Maybe I got to just circulate that to everybody, so you have a definition of
Well,
what it is. Rather than, we're going to take forever to go through this
Yeah,
list.
why don't we, can we just use this as a first pass? We're going to be refining a lot of
Okay,
things
okay,
here.
okay, yeah, so let's speed it along, let's get the vote, and then we can, then we can go back over it again later.
Yeah, yeah.
Good questions, and I think we should talk about them.
All right, so
Okay.
multifamily.
Let's just vote now, okay.
Um,
All right, Beth, did you,
Oh, yeah, I would say a 3 on multifamily.
Marnie?
3.
I'd say 3 as well, yeah.
I would say a 3.
3.
Also 3?
Okay. Next one is townhouse. These would be no more than 6 combined, you know, would not be a string of 25 townhouses, but,
Yeah, but that's something we want to consider later.
yeah.
Whether there's a
I'm just
limit-
saying, just
We'll talk
as,
about that
With
later.
limited, you know, what,
Yeah.
yeah. it's
Okay.
just-
the townhouses which are attached.
Plan standards.
Marty?
I'm
Three.
voting a 2.
3 for Marnie, I vote 3. Bill?
I want to go 1 because I want to see 55 plus up on top.
There's a subtle distinction.
Yeah. Jonathan?
I would, I'd still keep it 2.
Pat?
I am a 3. I think on every single residential item.
You're
on
a
the
2,
list.
Rick?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll do 2 as well.
So we have 4 3s.
Right.
That's the majority. Next one is dwelling apartments, condos.
And this is new apartments and.
This is new work. This is not,
existing
Can I,
that-
can I,
we have a separate category
can
for.
can we,
Okay.
can we
Dormitory.
amend this strike apartments and just have condos? Because I would say 3 on apartment, but on condos, we've been talking
Yeah.
extensively about over age 55 housing condos.
This one, I wonder if it was in there because of, I lifted these from another source, but because it's a rental as opposed to a owned.
Yeah,
Do you want that as 2
Facility.
separate entries?
Right, that's
Apartment
what I'm
as one
wondering.
entry and condos another entry? Would that be useful?
That's what I,
What about just calling it apartments? Condos could be,
Yeah, condos is a form
Form of ownership.
An
Apartment is
ownership.
a
A
structure.
building form.
Yeah.
why don't we scratch condos then?
Okay.
All right, I think it's a good idea.
so you're taking that out entirely,
Just apartments.
correct?
Correct, so apartments is the title. Is it my turn, I guess? I'd call that a 3. Bill?
No.
3.
3.
3.
3.
3.
Okay, 3s have it. Mixed use with residential component.
Home occupations.
Home occupation is missing there.
I'm sorry, home occupations, yep, wrong.
Once again, this has nothing to do with structure.
Right, it's kind of
This
like,
is,
Be
can
an
you,
accessory use maybe instead?
This is, can you have an office in your house or your apartment?
So should we put that under accessory?
I think so.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
All right, let's do that.
Which has its own set of,
Yeah,
So would they
bylaws.
not be able to do condos if on the top of the hill? Is that what we're saying? Because we're not voting on that?
well, the townhouses could be a condo. I mean, it's a structural, I guess,
I didn't know if
ownership
they wanted to
structure.
do like apartment inside.
we treat it like a 55 plus. It has to do not with the structure, but the occupant. How it's owned, how it's,
Yeah,
that's a separate consideration
it's not
from
use, it's ownership.
its ownership. We have to consider it, but it's separate.
But if there was like an apartment, like a regular apartment, 1-floor apartment, you normally wouldn't call that a townhouse, but it could be a condo. There's condos that are 1-floor layouts that are like an apartment, but then you can own them. So I didn't know if, because we had said the 55 plus, if that's, I don't know, I'm just. I mean, we can just, yeah, we can move on, I just didn't know if we wanted to talk about condos.
What's the
a
difference
little different.
between that and that?
well, we're, it's a loose term that doesn't have clarity. As Patrick said, a condo is a legal ownership structure as opposed to a
yeah.
building type.
All right, home occupations are as an accessory.
Right.
Correct. So we're going to go to mixed use with residential component. Then that usually stipulates mixed use, which might be office, commercial on the ground level, residential on the second level.
Do we want to call that accessory again?
I
Or do we want, what do we want?
I
How
don't
do
know,
we
I
want
think
to treat
with
that?
putting a lot of accessory.
Okay, so
No.
let's,
Mixed use has because there's a frontage
yeah,
issue
it's a
around.
building type.
It's a different building type.
Agreed, okay.
So,
Yep, never mind.
so again, mixed use would be something other than residential, non-residential, with residential above on Browns Hill on the top. Who was the last one?
I think you were.
Did you go last, Marnie? Did you go first last?
Just have people shout out. We don't need to.
Right.
Going 3.
3.
All right,
3.
3.
yeah, I'll go 3. Bill?
No.
3.
Okay. 3 it is.
Residential care, 7 or more clients.
7 or more clients, so this could be any kind of care facility, 7 or more people or clients in that.
3.
top of the hill. I vote no.
I'd go 3 on that.
3.
I was thinking of 2, because of the whole, yeah, just a 2.
Rick?
I already said
You said
3.
3,
I'd say no.
no?
I'd say no, too. So where'd we
So
come
that's
out on that?
1, 2,
Got
2
3
no's, and
3 no's and
3.
3 threes.
threes.
well, let's discuss it a little bit, then, worthy of
Well,
discussion.
I had a 2, so we had more people who wanted it. I'll make mine a 3. Does that make
Should we,
Problem solved.
but with 2 no's, should we discuss it? Is that worthy of discussion?
Well, curious what the no would be.
I'm curious as
Yeah.
well.
So, Bill?
I don't think nursing facility is a wise use of the most spectacular views in town. And I look at it as an extension of health facility, fitness, same kind of thing. I don't know.
So if it was an extension of independent living, assisted living,
That's what I'm thinking.
yeah,
Yeah.
in other words, it's a compound, it's a nice,
Well, that's what I'm
cohesive
thinking.
compound.
It could be a over age 55 compound, but it has gradations of
All right,
assisted,
I'll change it to a 3.
as long as it's not a commercial.
I think
I'll change it to a 3.
Not a
probably
clinic or
unlikely
something.
somebody, a
Yeah.
developer would choose that as a,
I know.
without being associated with some other.
I agree. That's why I made it a 3.
Who else said no?
I said no, and I was thinking of it as that accessory, it would be part of a special permit process for some other project.
Yeah,
If it was gonna be up there, but as a standalone project in and of itself, I would say it has no
yeah,
purpose of being there.
right.
But I think this is more like a congregate care type
Yep.
place.
Yeah.
Continuing life care.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, that's a 3. Now, services, business, financial, professional. And these are a little bit vague, business support services.
That's really offices.
It's offices.
No, you have office down here. Oh, geez, separately. What's a business support service that's different, not from an office?
We are assuming that these are all, these would be standalone as opposed to included in
Yeah.
just what we just described as an accessory to a life care condo development, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Then I would say no to all of them.
all in this services list.
Yep.
What about medical services, extended care?
Well, that's what I'm saying is, that's why I asked the clarification question. If these were standalone facilities as a commercial.
Right. So then maybe we just need to frame this
So
that,
you're, wait a minute, you're going, what about offices? You're excluding them too, that whole column?
Again, if they're standalone commercial uses,
Right.
no. If they're
Okay, because
incorporated.
that is one of the most important options that the seminary thinks for, true or not, will reuse the facilities that are there and extend them. There were 2 options that they considered. One was
Yeah, but we.
life sciences and the other was commercial office.
But we know that's not realistic. The commercial office market is so overbuilt, underutilized, it's not gonna
Yeah,
happen.
but we shouldn't make,
But do
we
you wanna-
shouldn't,
Hold on.
I don't think, I totally agree with that, but
Right.
I'm not sure that we should make that decision. The question is, would we object if for some reason a life insurance company came along and said, I want to put, 400 employees here, right? I mean, that's the question.
Yeah, no, I get it,
And the market's going to change at some point.
Yeah, it's, jeez. I only say that because that's
So.
one of the clinging hopes that the seminary is,
I understand
clinging
that.
to.
I understand that. Then I could modify it to go for a 3 for all of those, because it then becomes a very strenuous
Yeah.
process that you can reject if it's not appropriate.
Right,
Right.
okay.
so
I
do
would
we,
agree with.
Well, let's start with business. Do we want to just answer them all?
Yes,
I think
As a-
I'd
as
say
a-
3 for all of them.
I'm good.
I think they're all unlikely, but 3 for all of them.
Anybody have alternative feelings?
Agree with that?
I agree.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree too.
all right.
I would be a little more adverse to the medical section, because you have clients who are gonna come in all the time, people coming and visiting, getting care. So, whereas if it's an insurance company that wants to put their headquarters there or their offices there, they're gonna come at 9 and leave at 5. It's not gonna be an all-day-long thing. And so another way to think about it is as an economist, the first 4 are services to people, whereas the last 2 offices, those are services to business. They're sort of like business services. You don't have a lot of clients with business services.
Yeah.
Personal services, you have a lot of clients. But, I mean, I could go for 3 for all of them, but I'm saying there is a distinction there.
I agree with the distinction. I find it inconceivable that you would have medical offices up there. From the consultant's report, I think they indicated that the medical offices, in terms of rental, doesn't generate as much rent as other uses. So,
But do we want to preclude it?
I would include it as a 3, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
That doesn't matter in this ranking,
It
no.
doesn't matter,
Okay,
in a
well,
sense. And the other point that the consultants made was access to hospitals, and so obviously the Cummings Center, which has space available, is closer to Beverly Hospital than the
Right.
Gordon Conwell site. So it's, I think, rather unlikely that there would ever be any new construction of medical offices unless someone knows
Okay.
something about medical reimbursements that I don't, but I hear about it all the time at home.
All right, we'll put 3 down for,
That's accessory
so
use.
retail, that could be an accessory there.
Yeah, accessory.
Okay,
We agreed?
Yep.
Not a
Yep.
standalone?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay. Industry processing, laboratory, medical, analytical.
Is there a
Yeah.
reason not to include light manufacturing?
Oh, man.
Yeah, that-
As a special permit?
Well, again,
Widgets
it's not whether,
company.
it's mostly, and I kind of agree.
Trucks delivering parts, taking pieces, finished
I got
product
Amazon. I got
away.
Amazon vans up and down my street 10 times a day.
That's not light manufacturing.
I get as much traffic at work as I do on our street at home for trucks.
I don't know, you've got loading, unloading, it's.
Well, so does labs and medical, analytical, all those things have the same.
So does this include pharmaceutical, biopharma?
Yeah,
But those are traffic studies that the applicant would have to have, very onerous, it's a pretty,
Right, if it was a special permit.
they have to
right.
invest in all of that in addition to all the development that's going to have to happen up there to support it, so.
Light
I
manufacturing
actually
is-
think the light manufacturing is so antithetical to the residential areas around this campus and also in this town.
When the
that-
natives revolt, I'll say, I don't know you.
And light
What did you
manufacturing,
say,
even
Bill?
though you can imagine
What
it
did you
not,
say?
the natives revolt, we'll pretend we don't know you, or something to that effect.
Just
Quote,
using the
unquote.
term, using the term manufacturing.
I agree with Bill's statement, but I also agree that the trick is that is light manufacturing that's very clean and simple, and there's light manufacturing that's pretty messy,
Yeah.
with a lot of needs, like back alley needs and,
But I guess-
stockpiling of things.
Labs are 10 times more infrastructure use than any other light manufacturing use. They're probably
Yes, water, oh, yes,
Environmental
oh,
So
yes.
you're
considerations.
suggesting
Not only water, but
Three.
power,
Yep.
because you're moving a lot more air.
Yep.
You're doing a lot of different things.
level 3 special permit for, like.
I guess if you're going to consider anything, unless if everyone's agreeing that we're not including industrial and processing on the Browns Hill, I would include light manufacturing in one of the uses.
But so for New England Biolabs, we would have to have that included if we wanted to consider, have them.
No, that's
New England Biolabs
laboratory
is
medical.
here.
Well, it's light manufacturing. It's not just labs.
What?
We make a product and ship it. It's
Yeah,
light
for testing.
manufacturing.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I don't think it's appropriate here.
Okay.
Wait a minute, so
I hear your question, and I'll respond. I
New England Biolabs is or is not
It's there.
covered?
It's there.
It's there.
No.
Okay.
Well-
We're talking about light manufacturing, and he was just blurring the line a little bit, but I think there's still a distinct line.
So I'm gonna move this to a decision and say a 2 for light laboratory, medical, and analytical. Just as because everybody says, that's gonna have, a preferred use, everybody wants that up there, but it's still a special permit that can be refused.
Just to be clear, right? You're throwing the gauntlet down in front of the theological seminary, which wants this as of right use. Now, I agree with you, but I just want to make it clear
Yeah.
that's we've now
I'm glad you
created a
bring that
line.
up, because that thought did occur to me. I'm going, at one point, we said, well, all existing structures, we will grant a by right use, obviously with some limitations, right? We're certainly doing that in theory. We haven't decided with the student housing.
Well, John Whitten made a really good point with respect to as of right, and he suggested, for example, with respect to this particular use, that it involve a special permit. Because the as of right, if you were to make it as of right, if there's an appeal from any kind of a denial, which is generally not favored, it would go to the zoning board of appeals.
Right.
But if you have a special permit, a denial of a special permit goes to the land court. And he thought it was important that these uses, other than, say, the dormitories, would be by special permit, although that special permitting process could be a 2 as opposed to a 3. But the 1 doesn't give the planning board sufficient control. We would have to allow it, and we could proffer conditions, but those conditions would not be binding, per se.
I don't think Bill said 1, though. Did you?
So,
He said the seminary wanted a 1.
I said the seminary.
He didn't say he wanted
I
a
said
1.
we're drawing a line here,
Yes.
Right.
in which we're on one side and the seminary is another.
Yes.
Right.
Right?
But we're going special permit light because of the very legal reasons that John Whitten indicated to us. He
Well, my
said-
view is nothing should be allowed up there without at least special permit light. So
Right.
Right.
I'm fine with the 2.
I'm
2's fine with me.
2, me too.
I'm a 3.
So I just wanted,
I'm a 3 for that, but I would also include light manufacturing.
Well, I have a question. So you're saying if New England Biolabs, as is, wanted to move to the seminary, they would also need light manufacturing?
Well, I guess it depends on how,
It was structured.
the.
That's why it's
how
a
we
special.
define
That's why.
laboratory
But that's why it's a
something else.
special permit.
But-
Because if they came in and said, "Listen, we're going to devote a small section, or partially to," then we go, "Okay, so how much? Traffic, resources, water, septic." You have to consider it within the context of the specific use that they're proposing.
That's
So
what I'm
you
saying,
could
it's a
say,
special permit,
and the special permit gives you that
but a 3.
allowance.
Yeah, I don't
But I think
think,
it's
yeah.
I think it's a 3, because again, there's too many, there's different kinds of labs too, and the amount of work we would have to go through to define what that use is under a 2, you might as well just make it a 3, because it's gonna be too specific.
Well, what we're trying to do here is,
In vivo testing, or
well, no.
do we have a hazardous materials bylaw that
There's a
restricts
strategy
certain use
here.
of-
The strategy is to not be so exclusive to deter somebody that's thinking of that at this location, either reusing those buildings, hopefully.
That's a hundreds of millions of dollars investment. A special permit process would be expected.
Right?
And I would say it's, the differences that I know between a 2 and a 3, I would say it's a 3, but you collectively, I mean,
Well,
I'm the outsider here
You
too.
do raise some issues, because
Right, the
you know,
hazardous materials.
the hazardous materials, and there might be biological materials.
Right.
And so the wastewater becomes really critical.
There's
So-
and those are all permitted types of, those are state permits that require and define.
So-
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
okay, so that may be.
so the special permit process really is secondary to all the other
Yeah.
federal and state permitting that they're going to have to get. And if they can't get by that, it ain't going to happen.
Right.
So in my world is I'm trying to offer, at least open the door and say, we're willing to consider it and make it not too onerous a process, but you've got to comply with all the other
Regulations. yeah,
regulations
all
and
other
rules and statutes to make this, work.
EPA, DEP, everything.
yeah.
So while we're on that subject, what Pat's point here also is that there's a little bit of a gray line between light manufacturing and this category. And do we want to revisit light manufacturing and put it to bed one way or the other?
Well, then you'd have to define all the categories of light manufacturing that you would allow.
Right.
The list could be, 50 different types of
Or
manufacturing.
just call it a special permit process number 3 and
Three plus.
let that determine what.
And the question is whether the
Infrastructure will
board wants to
support.
give it a couple minutes to discuss. I mean,
Why don't we
I kind of.
circle back to it? Let
Okay.
it percolate.
Okay.
I don't think it's a win for getting this overlay district approved to put in light.
I agree. I just wanted to make
manufacturing.
sure that the board had an opportunity to
That
discuss
was
it.
my exact point, because light manufacturing is such a pejorative term in so many people's minds, you've lost it right there.
It
And it's
connotes
complicated.
something-
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
I think lavatory to me is the same arbitrary word that defines a lot of different things.
Right, but because people think of New England Biolabs, they have something that they think versus, yeah. Because I was thinking when I just saw that, I was like, but that is, yeah,
Okay, can we move on?
yeah.
Accessory for daycare?
Yes.
Daycare, child or adult, so general services,
Accessory?
Accessory only.
yeah.
Okay.
Accessory, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
And then we have accessory uses for the
Entertainment
And I
containers.
just,
For trash and receptacles.
well, just,
That's accessory anyway.
that's accessory, these are accessory uses.
Oh, no, that's a permitted use.
Okay, the next area, NR, that's the newer set of apartment buildings and the
That's
land around
ENF.
them.
It's right here.
ENF.
Right, Let me make one comment about what we've just done, is we've basically given no ones,
Right.
Right.
right?
Yep.
So once again, there is a line between us and the seminary.
And I think I think that's a very good point, and I think we should revisit that. I think we should go through, because we're stating preferences, and then we should stand back and go, well, if we implement this, what are we really saying?
Yeah.
We're saying, what we're saying is, we want to want some control over almost everything.
Well, and that was the recommendation of John Witten. He said
Right.
maintain control.
So
But the
remember
as of right would be the reuse of the dormitories.
As
Yeah,
is.
and that's the ace in the hole for the seminary, because it's the single
Right.
most valuable piece of property. As you remember, the assessment was probably would sell for $30 million, which is double the amount they'd get from single-family housing.
No, triple the amount they get.
All
Remember,
right.
single-family housing, they got to tear everything down,
Okay,
too.
so triple the amount. But I think that's a good question, once we've gone through this and go, okay,
Do we
how,
want to back off and actually allow
right,
anything
how,
about it?
how does this, how does this
Phase
then-
two, phase
How
two.
do they then play with each other?
Well, we haven't talked
We
about the
can-
reuse of those buildings at all.
No,
So
we're
those
not
would be-
there. We're
Those would be.
different zone.
No, but the
Every
reuse of
reuse on the
Brown's Hill,
top.
At the top of the hill.
Yeah, reuse of the
So some
buildings.
of the reuse, I
But,
think some
but these
reuse-
uses are uses, whether it's a new or,
Right.
Oh, some of them, yeah.
whether it's a new building
I
or
think
To
reuse.
me, that makes a difference.
These
Oh,
are.
no, I
u-
get it. That's to Bill's point, because we, several weeks ago, said, well, all existing buildings potentially might be by right.
Yeah,
So I think that's definitely worth going back and saying, well, do we want to adjust that?
yeah.
And is it one thing if it's a new building, and is it another thing if it's?
Well,
But we're moving this along. I think
let's
we
move
can,
this along.
we can,
but
we can revisit
that.
one
Let's
more
keep
time.
going.
Yeah.
So we're at the north residential. Fitness, health facility, we want that as a accessory.
Accessory.
Same with the next one.
Meeting facility,
Yeah.
park playground,
Are we now?
Yeah, accessory, right? Trail by right.
Yep.
So we're down here, just so everyone, 7.6 acre.
Ooh-huh.
Now, residential, we have multifamily.
Yeah.
What's there now is some mix of multifamily and apartments.
What's there now is only
Oh,
dormitories.
dormitory.
Only dormitories now in this zone.
Can we put up the, that map again?
So NR is right in the center there, right there. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So it's E and F without the gatehouse.
Well, this is where we're thinking, actually, either two primary uses, either some sort of residential or that was the assisted life care.
No,
No.
not in this area, but this would be,
Oh, you're right.
we're going to
right,
supplement.
Right, sorry.
That's central, but we would supplement, we're thinking of supplementing that with more residential
Can you
houses.
go back to the map again? Okay.
There's the
It's NR and CRC?
NR is really where the two dorms are.
E and F. Think
But we're going to
E&F.
supplement it with
Right.
at least 12 other units in that vicinity.
Have we made that decision?
No, that's the way it is right now. It's not final.
Okay. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I knew where we were and what we were thinking.
Okay, can I cut to the chase here? So the first three
Accessory.
uses, are accessory uses. The trail is by right. The dwellings, multifamily townhouse, apartments, and 1 and 2 family detached are all threes. Dormitory conversion is a
Whoa,
1.
whoa, whoa, whoa,
You're-
whoa, 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 whoa.
Are you, you're revisiting the first category?
I'm on the
A residential.
NR. I'm on NR.
Second page,
I'm on the
going
second
through the
page.
residential list.
Yeah, she's in NR now.
Right. So the dormitory conversion is a 1. That's E and F, being
Yeah.
converted to whatever. And then to be consistent with the Browns Hill Upper Campus, all the other dwelling units would all be 3s. Home occupation would be an accessory use. Second unit or carriage house, I don't know what that means. The restaurant, cafe, and coffee shop
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
would
whoa,
be
whoa, whoa, whoa,
accessory,
whoa, 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 whoa.
right?
So
Stay with residential for a second.
Okay, all right.
let's stay with residential.
Okay.
So residential, we're going to make,
So the apartments are by right.
Yeah.
The conversion, the
conversion is
Right.
the dormitory conversions.
So, but Emil just mentioned potential of 12, I think, residential.
several of the concept plans have additional residential
Right,
woven in to that area.
right.
So what do we want to allow that,
That's exactly my point.
So the idea was to give the developer the options of any one of these.
Right.
I would say any one of the first 3 is a 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I misspoke. You're right.
I would say the same thing.
That's why I was wondering why you were racing ahead.
Yeah, I was.
Because I want to get this, I want to
I
get
know, I
know,
hear you.
I know,
Hear
but-
you.
But you're right.
it's
These should be 2s.
Yes, this requires,
Yeah. two
not
is-
every zone is the same.
I know. I apologize. I apologize.
Okay, so.
Anybody disagree with 2?
No.
No, so dwelling 1 and 2 family detached. Now, this gets into the single family, right? Isn't this?
Right, but it's still a
detached, yes.
special permit, and what's really great is there are places in this zone where single families fit like a little puzzle piece.
So you
And
wanna
so
make
you
it a
don't
2?
want it, you don't want to preclude it.
You want to make it a 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all of them are 2.
How about apartments, too?
Home occupations, are we?
Yeah, I think everything.
Is that in it?
That's accessory, home occupation's
That's what I
accessory.
thought.
Yeah.
So the one thing I wanted to mention before we go too much further is there's been talk about the fact, and he's not here to, Patrick, could you put the map up again possibly?
No.
Okay, here comes the other Pat.
Map man.
Pat, could you put the map up for just a second? What I want to talk about just briefly is something that John Whitten brought up a number of meetings ago, which is there are ways to have a little bit of flexibility at the borderline between zones. And you can define, and John, you correct me if I'm wrong, that you can define a certain number of feet where one zone can sort of intrude on the other zone, provided it's clear, you know, what the parameters are. Do you want to weigh in on that for just a second?
Absolutely, that's absolutely correct, and it allows some flexibility if you hit outcrop on the site, for example, and you need to exceed either setback or go 10 feet into the abutting zone. So the language is pretty straightforward, and the board could pick and choose. That kind of flexibility might be more relevant in the BH district as opposed to the NR. But yes, that you've described it exactly right, John.
Okay, so the specifics here that I wanted to bring up is between this C-RC zone and the NR zone. If there's a large kind of congregate housing or, residential senior care kind of building, it might want to poke into the NR district a little tiny bit here and there. And what I think I understand is that we could define how many feet we could have some space here where that the line between NR and CRC could be a tiny bit negotiable, so that we don't lock somebody into that exact line. And this is where I think a little bit of flexibility would be useful.
I think because you can't really define any of these lines mathematically.
Can you point to the line that I'm talking about? It's the vertical line between, right there, yeah, up and down. That line right there, I feel needs to be a tiny bit negotiable between these uses. So if we had a larger complex in CRC section, it might want to intrude a little bit into NR. I'm not talking about hundreds of feet, but a few feet. Just some flexibility. And that can, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding, that can be built into the code.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, again, because we don't really have a surveyed map of the site, so we can't define any of the lines.
And there's a little bit of a fudge factor
So,
between
yeah.
these two zones. So
Correct.
anyway, I know that sounds off
Yeah.
the subject, but I just wanted to bring that up.
I would be willing to consider even more flexibility across this whole zone here. I mean, reuse of existing is by right, but a special permit process that allows a development to straddle across multiple zones here further than that buffer that you've defined might be something that we shouldn't exclude as an option to a developer.
Exclude.
Exclude,
Yes, I agree.
yeah.
Yes, I'm not talking about into a heritage landscape or a protected area. I'm talking about between two developable zones. That's what I'm talking about.
But I guess I didn't want to, I was wondering whether it's worth considering not limiting that to a certain distance. I wondered, is this, I was trying to look ahead, CRC use much, could we allow a development to straddle across part of HL into CRC, into NR that also touches NA? If it's all special permit process level 3 residential development or something like that.
Well, that particular zone is kind of defined by roads.
Yes.
Anyway, on three sides.
Apparently,
Well, that's, I mean, that's a good question. What if somebody says, I want CRC and I want NR, and I'm going to,
That's the zone I'm talking about. That's not defined by a zone. It's not in the heritage landscape. It's not existing topography. It's
Yeah.
that's all disturbed area. Whereas up where you're talking about now between CRC and HL, that's overlapping into the heritage landscape where you have historic topography, historic mature trees, buildings, road alignments. It's all, I've defined sort of the four components that make the heritage landscape, and that would be disturbing those components.
so.
That's a different condition than I'm talking about between NR and CRC, which is basically a meadow with an arbitrary line in the middle of the meadow.
Well, the NLR is topographically challenged in there. You got some pretty steep
Yep.
slopes on that NR section
Yep.
there.
But it's not a heritage landscape.
No,
But there is also zoning boundaries between it, and you're, just because there's a road there, doesn't necessarily mean it should govern and restrict the development, I guess.
So I think what John is saying, though, is he wants, within the projected zones, on this map, flexibility, and maybe I'm incorrectly.
May I consider that we get on with the voting, and we can take this up in phase 2 with the other,
Yeah.
Yes,
with the
it's gonna-
other sort of nuances that we're
It's
talking
going to
about?
come up when you look at when you compare and contrast
Okay.
this zone and the next zone, that's all.
Wait,
Okay, second unit or carriage house?
I don't know what that means.
I don't either.
let's just take that out for just,
Good idea.
so you know. In this area,
That's because you designed some for the area down near the, not in this zone, they were down near the carriage house, right?
Down here, wasn't
Little
it? Oh, no,
rear,
over here.
little rear thing
Stables.
there.
yeah,
I think that works there, but not here.
yeah. Okay, restaurant, cafe, coffee shop, retail, again, that would be
Accessory?
accessory. Daycare center, same thing.
Yes?
Yeah.
Accessory dwelling, I don't think there would be. I mean, if we had single-family housing in, this area is all multiple.
Would that
Multifamily.
accessory dwelling be to existing unit?
Yeah.
I think
To
that's
existing
kind of a-
building, I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a no.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do with it?
It's a no. I don't think it's really applicable. It just doesn't seem to fit.
It's very
Yeah.
tight in there, like I say, the
Yeah,
buildings fit
there's
like
not a-
puzzle pieces. It would be really hard to do well in there, so I think
Yeah.
it's a no.
Yeah.
There's other places where it could work better.
Okay, we're making progress.
We'll make a, let's leave it a no. If we come up later and find that there's a use for it, we could revisit that. But CRC is the central district, and the
Map,
use
please.
is one, there is currently no buildings on it. It's the Frisbee Field. And again, recreation, education, public assembly, fitness, health facility,
Accessory?
Yeah, those two should be accessory,
first two accessory,
and the trails by right.
by right, trail. Residential, now we have single to multiplex, so that, there's an array of residential buildings there. And the max would be, 2 stories to 2.5 stories maximum,
Oh, you've got the height limit that would,
yeah.
so,
So not apartment buildings, not
so will the
multifamily.
bylaw deal with density? We're just dealing with allowed uses?
We're just using with allowed uses now.
Right
The
now, it's just
bylaw
allowed,
hopefully
but-
would deal with density and.
Right.
And
so that's accessory.
Okay, so here you could do single family,
Yeah.
okay.
But you wouldn't want the residential uses just previously discussed.
Is this opening the
I know.
door to a Toll Brothers who could come in and say, well, I want to build 10 McMansions?
No, the land isn't there to do 10. Again, we're going to define the number of units.
the building standards will
Building
define
standards
that, will
define
prevent
what-
that approach.
Toll Brothers does 1 acre, 2 acre
No,
zoning,
no,
whatever.
well, that's what I'm getting at is,
They're not going to get many in there to do that. So it's compact development.
With 6 acres, the most.
so are you thinking then single-family condos? Single-family like
On
condo?
our low intensity scheme, we had all those little boulders like, they were duplex houses. Attached, two-family attached houses completely in that area.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
that
why-
was an option.
So they wouldn't be single building
Not
family,
Not detached buildings, they were attached duplex buildings
okay.
in that area. Again, to get density, you get maximum density in there.
Should we put duplex to multiplex or leave single? It's up
I
to-
just was giving a range.
Attached,
one to, we could say attached, because we did not have any single units, but I think there could be one stuck in there if we wanted to, but
Or not
I
limited.
can't really say
There
attached to
may
a
be an
single.
opportunity where they could actually put one in that just doesn't,
Okay, so
it's
we
not
shouldn't limit
conducive
it.
to a
Okay.
multiplex.
Right, it fits, it
Yeah.
finishes the puzzle.
Right.
Yeah,
Agreed.
So I think
So-
that's a 2. Do
Yeah.
you-
should be a 2, I think, and.
I agree.
yeah.
The home occupation, that's
So,
accessory?
but let's get everybody agree with the 2?
Yeah, I'm gonna take.
So we'll just keep going, and if anybody objects,
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
then
so the senior service care, that's a 2?
Well, home occupation,
Oh,
are we
that's an
doing?
accessory.
Accessory.
The senior service care,
2.
Is that a,
That,
like a?
That's an option.
River Bend.
That's an
yeah.
option.
Human care.
Two.
Instead of having all residential, that's an option, to have
Yeah.
a commercial building there, a senior service.
Let's live, work.
so
Oh,
wait a
does
second.
that- Are you all a 2 on?
No,
Two.
I,
You're
I,
3.
I think that should be a 3,
Yeah.
but that's my opinion. Others? Just because it's a larger, bulkier building, it should have higher standards. It really has to be, for it to work, in our analysis, we've shown that you have to think about it, think about the topography, think about the parking.
Parking.
It's
traffic.
pretty complex.
Yeah,
It should.
It's sort of you wouldn't put it in the middle of a residential area.
Well, it can fit
would-
in there, but
it would
it needs,
fit in.
it needs care.
A little bit
Needs
of a
design
square
care.
peg in a round hole
It-
to me.
it-
So,
Go ahead.
but, you know, what's the difference between a 2 and a 3? I mean, we're on a scale of a 2 to a 9.
Well, good question. The idea is if we say it's a 3, then when we craft the bylaw, we create design standards that are a little heavier lift. So for example, if we have standards around parking,
Well, what if you did that in a 2? In a special permit light, you just put design standards.
they're all going to have design standards, but what he's saying is if you use, or did you say parking? Whoever said
I
parking.
mentioned parking.
You could make it slightly,
These subtleties are, we're going to have to get.
It helps set the compass in the right direction.
yeah. it's-
For crafting the bylaw. If nothing else, it's going to help whoever actually writes the words.
Okay.
In the actual bylaw, there might not be these gradients. It's just really so that the planning board reaches consensus that, for example, with this particular line item, just let me finish, that we put more effort into taking care with topography and parking and
I'm on
visibility
board.
from the street.
Me too.
Right.
So we're going
3?
with
Okay.
the 3?
3. Now, live work, that's typically a dwelling unit on the second floor, an office on the first floor, it could be an attorney, maybe an architect, whatever.
No, we don't need more
I
architects.
know, we don't.
Sure don't need more attorneys. What do you say? Attorney Witten?
So it's just a way to get some kind of mixed use in there a little bit, something a little more.
You didn't want to have mixed use again because it got trashed the last time. I would vote a 3.
I would do 3.
Nobody's
fine with
objecting.
three.
Let's
Three's a
move
good,
on.
three's a good one, yeah.
Yep.
All right, 3 it is. Now we're into services, business, financial. So we have, again, the business, medical.
I think, once again, it's just like the senior care,
It's accessory.
these are developments that are going to have visitors, and there's going to be parking.
These would be accessory to the.
Accessory, yeah, to senior.
Well, we gave senior a 3, so I would give those a 3.
Yep.
3, so these would all be,
So all these are accessory,
No.
or just the 2 medical ones?
Everything.
Making
We're
them-
not trying to build a center city community here
Right,
where,
right.
where uses are all
Fair
jumbled
enough.
up on
Yeah,
top.
I agree.
People who,
Okay, next one is accessory.
all right, for now, we'll give it
Restaurant,
3s.
Accessory.
Yeah. Industry, processing, laboratory, again, medical, analytical.
not in a residential area.
So I'd like to bring up,
I would do that as N.
I'd like to bring up a concept around that. Let me play worst-case scenario. Imagine that a research facility came in and took over the whole top of the hill, and then another one came in and wanted to take over the whole bottom of the hill, would the planning board and the town be okay with that? Want me to go first?
I think we would then have to reconsider all of the residential development that you have planned for the lower and middle part.
Agreed. And I say no. I think it's either or, and the question is
That's
how
what I
you
would say,
handle
too.
that. The
I would
question
say
is
with
how.
either or.
Yes.
Either turn the whole place, if you're going to have some commercial biolab development in the middle,
Well,
then that's what's
right.
going to be in the middle.
If somebody comes in and says, I want the entire property and I want to build New England biolabs, you gonna say no?
No, I think that has potential. I just think that it's problematic to have a mixture of things, especially if you have a pretty heavy commercial at the top of the hill and a heavy commercial at the bottom of the hill, and you're trying to infill with residential.
True.
It just doesn't work.
Right. So the question is how to handle that. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's worth
I
discussing.
don't think
What's that?
we can. We'll have to do some real exception carve-outs. You know, because there's gonna be one, we'd like to reserve this for residential because it's the most amenable to
Well,
that.
if you
But-
give it a 3, then in principle, you can tie it to what goes on in the rest of the hill, right? So you can say it's a 3, and you let the developer know, if the top of the hill is going commercial, then we'll look at this 3 very favorably, but if the top of the hill is going senior and the rest of the middle is all residential, then we're going to look at this as a very unfavorable 3.
There's gonna be
mean,
a
that's
lot
the way
of,
we would
there's a lot of subtlety to
operate.
this.
Yeah, there is, but I think it's worth thinking about, because this is a complex site, and you have to think about those
I get it.
eventualities, and I don't know what the right answer is, but it's worth talking about.
No, I get it. How about we just finish this?
Perfect.
And we're gonna circle back, because it's the same question, what
me-
about the by right
To
uses?
me, the issue down
I mean, the thing is that the parts are connected.
No, no.
Yes.
And what we're doing is we're treating them as if they sort of are
And
just
we can-
parts.
And we can table it and come back to it.
Right.
But I think
Yeah.
it's an important point right here, that's all.
Yeah.
So-
So I think a larger building down here does not work, without encroaching on the
Residential.
residential and but also the open space.
So then, as a placeholder, do we want to say, what do we want to say? No or 3?
3.
Okay. And then we just circle back around on this.
Because
Yeah,
we
come
said
back
up at the top of the hill, 3, I think.
Okay.
And somebody comes back and says, I want all of these, and I'm gonna, so you're into a special permit for all those uses in all.
Oh, I have an idea. It may be that we could define the maximum amount of square footage that would be allocated to laboratory medical analytical.
Before we get into that level of
If they were
nuance,
exceeded, there couldn't be another.
before we get into that level of nuance, what I'd love to do is finish the
Yeah, okay,
ranking.
but I
That-
just had that idea.
Hold that idea, if you could, for just a second. What I think would be worthwhile doing is, after we've done this scenario, at some point, circle back around and basically kind of play worst-case scenario in a couple different ways,
Right.
and then just see how the board feels about that. And that, I think that's worthy of like half an hour or 45 minutes, maybe not at this meeting, half an hour, 45 minutes of focused conversation, of taking this thing for a test drive and to see what could go wrong. That's all.
That's absolutely right.
You
And
get the same-
writing the code around that is
Yes.
You get
tricky.
the
Yes,
same-
yes,
You get the
yes.
same thing if it turned out, for example, that all sorts of 55-plus developers started to flock in and look at the middle of the hill. And then you said, gee, maybe we really shouldn't have the commercial development at the upper part of the hill. This thing is sort of moving in one direction. The whole damn place is going to be 55-plus, so we could put some services in for 55-plus, the whole property.
So-
With different types of 55-plus.
So I think it's scenario building that we should
Yeah,
dedicate some time
yeah.
to, maybe not this meeting.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, how much is too much?
All right, so under.
So let's move on.
Under industry and processing, do we want to make that a 3? Because that encompasses the same
Yeah,
decision.
that's 3. Let me see, I can't let it go. The thing is, when we're writing a code, we have to have an assumption of a preferred thing to happen on the bottom, and it's the physicality of it that's important. I would not be prepared to say a mega building in there is the right thing to do. Residential or not, I think it's the wrong thing.
A mega
I could-
building.
A mega
Yeah, yeah.
building. I could see it on the top of the hill, but not on the bottom, because of the adjacent residential units and so forth.
Well,
So
it would
I-
be, it would also be more visible.
So when we start writing a code that's really based on building types, we can't leave it that open. I mean, we can make an exception where it's going to be a huge building, I guess, and then nothing else, sort of like what the consultants did. You know, they had a 200,000 square foot building or a 100,000 square foot building on 2 levels. The 200,000 just took up a good part of the heritage landscape, and then you have a ton of surface parking there and all of that. So it just drastically changes everything when you get a mega building in there, whatever the use is, business or, because they even had a senior facility in there, but
A
again,
big senior facility.
A
Yeah,
huge
yeah, no,
one.
I agree with that.
Again, that should be a whole, I think that
That's
should
a
be a
whole-
whole meeting.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I
I just
agree.
want to get it out before.
No, I agree with you. And then the other aspect of that is that
Because we have to move on the code.
the public may have real opinions about
Oh,
that.
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's
Okay.
move on.
Don't stop for me, I have to use the facilities.
We started this by saying we should go through one. Are we going through the whole?
It's worthwhile, though.
Okay.
at least now we
We're,
know
we're,
where.
we're-
We got
hey,
one
we're down to one, you know, the last page.
Yeah, and who
Second to
wants to
last.
tabulate them?
SRC, but the bottom of the page.
So we have
is really easy.
accessory dwelling, I'm looking at page 3 of 4 now, right?
Yeah.
Accessory
Did we
dwelling,
talk about media production at the last?
It's a
of the
three.
industry?
3.
All three, yeah.
Okay, both of them are threes. We didn't have media production at the top of the hill.
Accessory dwelling, I think, is a possibility here because of the C central area, mostly residential, you know, as a filler, kind of.
So
So I would
then,
give it a 3.
What would be an accessory dwelling, sorry?
What would be?
Yeah.
Well, could be a rental maybe for, or a mother-in-law
Or
place.
like an in-law apartment or
In-law.
something? Okay, got it.
kind of like in the backyard,
Yeah,
Yeah,
something.
tiny house,
Yeah, it doesn't- 3.
3,
I'm good with 3.
okay.
So
Yeah,
then
we
we're
got,
on-
we just deleting this trash
Yeah.
receptacles and so forth, okay. So now we're in the stables, RC district. The stables on the map is where the Pilgrim Hall is, and C&D dormitories. And the intention here was to put in 10 townhouses, I believe, right across the street from the Pilgrim Hall, plus another facility, which could be a meeting hall. This one has a little garage next to the Pilgrim Hall would be available. So we have, you know, 2 historic buildings, and here again, we had a meeting facility under Recreation, Education, Public Assembly. So again, this is where maybe, if for residents, they wanted a hall here this is where one could be. It would be right at the opposite, the Pilgrim Hall.
Could be in Pilgrim Hall or opposite Pilgrim Hall.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this brings up a good point on in talking with Marnie, what we decided to do with Pilgrim Hall and with the retreat house, because those are both sort of outliers on anomalous in a lot of respects to everything else going on. They're historic buildings, but they may be too expensive to rehabilitate, for example. But, and since they both sit in a district that, in the case of retreat, it's in the historic landscape where building is going to be discouraged. So we're going to be writing, you know, whereas you would like to see maybe meeting rooms or something in there, it could be a bed and breakfast in the retreat house. It could be any number of things there that could work. It could be a restaurant. And the same thing with Pilgrim Hall. We thought we would take those and put them in words in a different category under existing building types or buildings. And this would include the gatehouse as well, where we would have any kind of restrictions put on those buildings in the text and not try to do it on the, on this chart, trying to make it fit into a particular zone where where they are in location, but they don't necessarily fit in in terms of what we're trying to create as in the
Oh,
chart.
wait a minute, why, I mean, I'm not sure let's stick with the stables. Why don't you say, you know, you can do anything inside the stables you want, townhouses, multifamily, dormitory, home occupation, live, work, just treat it as, you know, what use you want to allow in
Well,
that.
That's kind of an easy one,
That's what we thought, we'd
but-
just like list all the uses, and
Yeah.
it would include those, as well as maybe a restaurant or some artist space. I mean, that Pilgrim Hall, I think. yeah,
Well,
it's a
we
big-
have retail here as a category, so
Well,
do
the
you?
difference would
Well,
also
it's
be if you were to
it's
take,
just- It wouldn't be anywhere except in Pilgrim Hall.
right, so if
Conceivably.
if you were to take it down, then could you build the same thing again using these existing uses? Especially with the retreat hall, if they take that down, I don't know what they would do, because we're discouraging new buildings on the heritage landscape. But the retreat, if that were to come down, because it's just too expensive, now we've
Too
listed any number
expensive
of.
even for an apartment conversion with a shell?
I'm just
Just using the
anticipating.
shell? Maybe.
They can't use it now because it's not up to code.
Right.
Well,
And
it just seemed to maybe be
It seemed easier to just.
clearer, just more clear.
And
listing
it's
them
primarily so that these uses don't spread to other parts of the site. And the stables, or the stable Pilgrim Hall is an easier one, but the retreat's more difficult, I
The
think.
hardest one is the gatehouse.
Well, that's going to be either state residential or
Right. But what I'm saying is it doesn't,
use.
it's hard to say anything
Office.
about it because it's so
Yeah.
restricted and it's in a zone that
Yeah.
we're not even developing, so.
But we just thought it had some merit to pull them out of the use categories here.
I'm supporting that.
And just write for the entire district use,
Right.
on that schedule.
Okay. Meeting facility, is that accessory?
Well, but by doing that, you could allow for them just to go, be left aside and forever decrepit.
No, we're still going to say what to do with them, but we're not going to attach them to the district that they're in. So we can say for the retreat, you can use it as a meeting facility, B&B, a restaurant, whatever.
Right, but the benefit of having them if a developer were to go in there, they would make use
Right,
of
so
them.
you could use it as a meeting facility, but you can't create new meeting facilities in the zone.
Yeah. That was the idea.
It would just be, the meeting facility would be an accessory. But, for example, you know, in my way of thinking is that our preferences were to preserve the retreat house in Pilgrim Hall, but I think the development agreement could address the circumstance where after some reasonable period of time of attempting to market those buildings, if there was never any interest because it was too expensive for one reason or another, the development could provide for that duration of preservation, and then to the extent that there's no interest and the buildings become decrepit, they can be removed. I mean, there's no sense, say, you know, providing for the retention of a building that has no attractiveness to a developer. But that's, again, one of those issues that lurks around the edges of this whole endeavor.
So we're looking at recreation, education, and public assembly on the SRC. So meeting facility, again, I was looking at, I know the park playground we call accessory and trail would be as of right. But I thought the meeting facility could either be a residential building or it could be a meeting facility opposite the Pilgrim Hall, you know, built as a meeting place for the entire development or this.
Wouldn't that
this
be
whole neighborhood.
accessory to that development? So we'd call it accessory or not?
But we've been
Well,
I would call it, I don't think we want a standalone meeting facility.
Well,
I
for
think we've
example,
talked about that,
yeah.
gathering places for the use of the local residents.
Mhm.
The other thing, though.
That's what
Just to throw a wrench in the works, you've been to Great Hill in Topsfield? That's a quite a large development, but they have a separate building with a swimming pool and probably meeting rooms and whatnot. So depending on the kind of residential development that were to take place.
But that's still accessory to that.
It's still,
Okay, call it
it's still,
accessory.
it's,
All right.
I can't go up there and use that pool, even if I pay them.
So it's accessory to that condominium development or whatever.
Okay, residential now. So we have multifamily townhouse apartments, dormitory conversion, which would be C and D
As of right, yep.
as of right. 1 and 2 family detached. So of all those dwellings, they all are potential types of buildings.
So on the previous page, we made those all twos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my point here would be that this particular area is, in my opinion, is a tiny bit more sensitive because it really is an edge to the historic landscape, heritage landscape, and the entry. It's sort of the gateway to the entire campus. And so I wouldn't necessarily rubber stamp them as twos. I would think about it for a moment.
Remember, it's not a rubber stamp, though.
I understand.
And again, I'm going to go back to what Bill originally said, and we should put on our agenda for the next meeting is, we want to be restrictive but not containing. A 2 still is a special permit that can be refused.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm just saying this area
I
is
get
slightly
it.
more sensitive.
No, I get it. I just, I want to lean, as we think about this, to being as careful as possible while allowing it, but giving us the ability to help shape it and ultimately say no. So, special permit is a hammer, no matter, whether it's a 50-pound hammer or a 5-pound hammer, it's a hammer.
Mhm.
So, that's what my thinking is on that. And we did.
So where would you
and-
land, 2 or 3?
2.
Okay. And how about others?
Yeah, I go 2 on that. Even the dwelling 1 and 2 family detached, we're hoping that there are multiple apartments or townhouses, not just all single-family housing down there, to make it
What about others?
compact.
2.
Yeah, 2 for me, too.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll follow that lead.
I'll go with 2. How about live, work?
What do we do on the other one?
What do we do with home occupations?
That's
That's
accessory.
accessory.
Okay.
Live work, actually, there really aren't any units here where you'd have a storefront and sort of workplace.
So take that out.
Except
Stables.
the
Oh, they're
garage.
going to be
The
separate.
garage,
The
yeah.
garage.
We take
I've always had my eye on that. I can imagine that being a sweet little residence and live workspace.
Should we put a 3 on it then?
Sure.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, I would put a 3 on live, work, and mixed use.
Okay.
Also, second unit.
Oops.
Second unit on a 3.
And 2s on the rest.
Yeah, okay. And 1 on the dormitory conversion.
Right.
Now, again, the same thing, standalone business support offices. To me, we turned that down in RC, we should turn it down here, or at least make it a 3.
Mhm.
The 3 being if for some reason the whole place wants to go commercial, then we have to have a way of adapting to that,
Yeah, so make it a 3.
as opposed to a no.
Right, right. Unlikely in any event, but make it a 3.
I'm good with it, right?
3 in all 3 of those?
Yeah.
I teeter between a 3 and a no, but I'll go with a 3.
Yeah.
Accessory on retail?
accessory, yeah.
An accessory dwelling is a no, because I just don't see that as, how would that work?
Daycare, child, or adult?
Accessory.
Accessory. Okay. SD district, this is a little more restricted area. This is just the 2 dormitories, A and B.
There's really nothing you can do down there except
No.
convert.
There's no area down there.
There's no land.
But you could have you could carve out a meeting.
Actually, I don't even think those units would make it past the Conservation Commission today.
No, they would not.
They would not.
They
They're
would
too
not.
close to
And they wouldn't
wetlands.
make it
Yeah.
past any kind of buffer zone that we'd create.
yeah.
So they're just grandfathered.
Yeah.
So,
But I would say carving out the inside and a small meeting facility that's accessory could be
Yeah,
useful.
Yeah,
yeah.
well, the same-
Yeah, if they want to have, if for some reason they get converted and they want to have their own
Fitness and health.
fitness center or their own little meeting facility as an
Yep.
accessory use, then sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Accessory. Parks Playground, accessory.
so the park playground would actually be
They
accessory
can have
to
all the
the
playground they want.
treehouse,
There's
right?
no land for it. but they can-
There already is a little playground under the letters S and D.
I know.
Trail by right. Containment, crash.
So dormitory conversion is by right, and then we're going to eliminate container device. So heritage landscape,
I mean, these are, yep, if you're going to conserve these, that's what you got.
Map, please.
Park trail and playground.
Yeah, I think the park playground is not by right, though.
Right.
I think it's a
about the
tour.
trail by right.
That's a good idea. I mean, we're trying to preserve something as opposed to making tennis courts,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So
Or
what are we
plastic
doing with the park
playgrounds.
playground,
Right.
making that a
We're
trail?
still talking about, what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting on the park playground?
2 or 3, I don't know
Yeah.
which.
Yeah, yeah.
2 or 3?
Why don't we do 3, because we'd rather leave it more natural than.
Yeah,
than,
yeah, I think so
man-made
too.
playgrounds.
Okay.
So even
trail
with
is
trails,
one.
even with trails, though, I mean, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say somebody wanted to create a yellow brick road with all sorts of weird lighting on it or something like that. That's a trail. Why can't I have that by right? You know, and it's a natural space.
Site plan review.
Yeah, that doesn't
Well, remember, you can
necessarily fix
condition
it.
it.
What's that?
You can condition it.
Yeah, and we'd also might have standards, to do, we certainly have lighting standards and.
Right.
But, that's only one example. I know what you're saying.
Yes, so that can, what I'm saying is that can go wrong.
Yeah.
It could, but while I appreciate your paranoia, it's like,
So you wouldn't be willing to do that as a 2, you want that as a P?
yeah, I as much as we can, and they're obvious, they're kind of obvious.
I will follow the board's lead on that. Everybody else, good with the P?
Okay.
P on a trail.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now we're in the UE district, which has nothing on it, but it's intended to be potentially expansion of the wastewater facility.
You don't want anything on it, do you?
Right,
Well, if there was a structure that you could move that was part of a playground, I think that, I don't think
Well,
that.
certainly you could
violates-
put a park or a trail
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
but not a structure, is what
Right.
you want a reserve area.
yeah.
so 1's on those?
No, unless it's a maintenance building or something, but I don't know, you'd put it on that anyway.
So those are by right. And A.
And NA the same by right?
Yeah, there again, we're going to pull out the gatehouse
Yeah.
from this use table.
Oh, look, we finished.
Yeah.
Good work.
Fabulous.
3 hours.
I would have been willing, if it wasn't so late, I would have been willing to accept more uses in HL than what was being proposed. It's a heritage landscape, but there is still some ability for the adjacent zones to utilize it if a developer we're so inclined.
Well,
Well, I
let's
think
talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second. What's interesting is you can't see it here, but if you point on the map, the line that goes diagonally up that separates heritage landscape, yes, that line right there is a
was no
significant change in
development.
topography that's capped by mature specimen trees.
Yep, understand.
So that's a pretty strong edge.
Diagonal blue or
Um,
dash line on top of
And
the
then
SRC.
the line that separates
There's a little
SRC
building here.
from
This is-
HL, if you can
this
draw
is that
up your
building.
cursor
Oh,
on
right,
that one,
okay. Oh.
SRC from HL,
Yeah.
that line there. Above that line is, in a sense, your gateway.
There's a
When you
little too.
look in from Essex Street or drive in from Essex Street, whatever you put at that node
Looking at it,
there
yeah.
is full-on presentation. So for example, if you put a multi-story parking garage there, that's your frontispiece for the project, for the campus. And so I think that that's a pretty sensitive spot there. So both those edges are pretty carefully considered. And encroaching on them,
You want
that the reason that SRC
Stop
crosses
closing
that sort of
We want to talk about this.
hypothetical road there is because when you start gathering things around the stables, it makes sense for them to be in a decent cluster, and it wants to get up a little closer to the.
I think maybe it's going to the
Treehouse.
next meeting conversation, because every scenario I'm thinking about is the one which includes multiple zones of a single development. And there could be something that we're not considering that would, if we were this restrictive in how we chop up the site.
I think
and
that
what we
is a-
allow in one place or,
A conversation that we need to have, and that's kind of testing our assumptions, testing all our assumptions.
Yeah.
I mean, we come at it with a lens, but then we have to step outside and look at it as someone who is from Mars and say, what are they doing here? And that goes to the 55-plus. We could conceivably have it in the lower portion of the site, and you could have it at the top of the site, and then you'd have this 55-plus mega complex, and is that really what the town wants? And so you have to balance it. We have to think about balancing it, maybe yes, maybe no. And then if we do want to balance it, how you would go about promoting one use, one place and one use at another. Or, if by chance there was a life science in the central area, would you want it at the top of the hill and vice versa? And how would you craft something that would preclude life science all over the place, which would implicate the residential uses and probably cause them to be less desirable? So those are kind of policy questions that we should think about, and
The other thing is, I did a recalculation on traffic impacts, and 300,000 square feet of office space will generate 1,500 cars
wow.
a day, going in the morning and coming out in the evening. That's 200 square foot. That's what office space is there now. Now, the seminary, the representative for the seminary says, well, we had 1,200 people on the campus for once, and I said, yeah, that's 1,200 people on campus. That's about 100 kids. Many of them were living on campus. They probably had 400 or 300 people commuting in and out each day, as opposed to 1,500. You ain't seeing nothing. 1,500 people trying to get in and out of Essex Street in a 1 or 2 hour window is going to be absolute chaos. And even if we lower it down to biolab levels, I still figure it's 700 cars a day. And that's not 700 cars a day. That's 700 in the morning, 700 in the evening, all going out a 2-lane road onto Essex or Woodbury Street. It's really going to change the neighborhood. Whereas if you had 55 plus housing up on top, you get about half as much tax revenue, but you have no traffic at all, no change.
So why are we having this conversation?
I don't know. Somebody was mentioning it. Okay, we can have it next week. We'll have it at the next meeting.
I think we've had this conversation.
Anyhow,
So can I make a suggestion? So the next agenda, as you referred to, is we back up from the 500-foot level to the whatever, 5,000-foot level and say, how does this all work and how does it play out?
and we'll have a draft of the overlay district, so we can kind of try and then think about how these uses,
Can we get that before the meeting?
oh, of course, of course.
And the other thing is, because on the 15th, I think it's the 15th, we're meeting in the public realm.
Right,
After-
16th, I think it is.
16th, at the
Library.
We ought to spend some time thinking about what it is we're doing.
Of course.
Because that is going to be the kickoff, and if we muff it, it sets the tone.
Yeah, that's an important thing on that agenda.
Yeah, so.
Well, did we talk about having a special meeting next week to prepare
Next
for that?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay. And I think it is important to talk about that, and I think it's also important for all the information to be simply presented, accessible, and wherever possible, visual.
Right. So, question, on the website, have we repopulated? So the big thing that caused a lot of problems was the high density. Did
Oh,
anybody-
right, well, have you,
Did we ever add low density, medium
no,
density?
no, have you looked at, I took your timeline and I
Yeah, no, I
revised
read
it.
it, I read it.
He's wondering what's on the.
So,
Everything that's on the website now has to essentially come off and be formatted, so
or are
the,
you using this as a template?
yes, for the new exhibit list.
Okay.
So this,
So when's
this
that
would,
happening?
well, that's up to Patrick. But, I mean, if people like this, this would go on the webpage
Yeah, yeah. No,
with
I get it.
reference to the exhibits, and so all the exhibits then would
No, no, I get
be
it.
identified.
Yeah, I
and
got- no.
And all those, everything's there, you know, the low, medium, high, but it's an evolving process, and people can see that.
Yeah.
And instead of the maps being out of context, they'll be in context in the PowerPoint presentation.
Sequentially.
Yes.
The maps help anybody because they're iterative. I mean, it's like an applicant that came before us wouldn't give us the revisions leading up to the submission of the project. We would just get the submission in what's being proposed.
But
I don't know if it's a benefit to have the iterations.
They're not iterations, they're choices.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it shows the work that the planning board has done. For example, I didn't include everything that the consultants have done because they have a final product now that's
Right.
up on, that can be an exhibit. But we have
that
works in
should be on the
progress.
website as well.
It is.
Okay.
Did you go over to the back?
I just want to make sure that it.
Consultants, other parties and interests. So I have lots of stuff. I even have miscellaneous Exhibit 1, Toll Brothers Proposed Subdivision.
Cool.
Well, too much is always enough for information anyway, so as long as it's out there, no one can complain, I guess.
Right, right. So-
Jonathan's right, we need to figure out, you're right, visuals are important, and simplicity and brevity are going to be really important.
And let's think about our questions,
The questionnaire questions.
questionnaire questions.
Yep. So I think we should all be prepared for that discussion next meeting.
Yeah.
Right,
What's our
So-
goal for next meeting?
to prepare for May
To have
16th.
that, Or know what we're gonna do for our presentation. That's
May
what we're
6th.
supposed to
I
do.
almost would put that first on the agenda, because we could get so zoomed in on the details of how what we just did, that's almost a whole meeting. So if we don't structure the 17th,
16th.
16th,
Let's do that first, and then we can look.
I think that's gonna be
Everyone
critical.
will have some, you know, I'm not going to promise you that this overlay district is done. It won't be, because
no, I
there's
get it.
so
I
many
get it.
things that have to
hope
be.
not, I hope not.
Well, I mean, it's just, when I say done, there isn't even a draft of it yet.
No, I
you know.
get it, I get it.
So
That's okay.
we can present the outline to people, you know.
I agree with Rick that the initial impression and the initial presentation is the most important one. So this next meeting with the public is the most important one. I agree with what you said, Rick. So
And we are the
100%.
ones setting the date for May. It's not like somebody else is telling us it has to be for May 16th. We're putting that upon
And are
ourselves.
you thinking that's like a 6 to 8 meeting?
Well, 6 to 7:45, I think.
Oh, right, because
Okay.
the library.
It's the library.
It has to be very compressed. This is like an elevator speech. We have to be like well-rehearsed and crisp.
Right.
And I think the focus should really be on the maps, do you think?
Yeah. We really have to think about how much message we want to get across and what is that message in terms of, we've been over so much material, we produce so much, we don't want to go through it all, I think, because that's just going to be
That map,
way too,
map that we've been using is the most important.
Yeah,
map, Because
yeah.
that's a distillation of 3 months of work or 4
But
months
what
of
we,
work.
another consideration is, though, the process we just went through is making us go back to the map and question, is the map correct?
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And have we defined, so even though we have that, it's great to, it's the
Yeah.
building block we needed to, develop from, but it's probably
Same
not the
with-
thing that's going to be presented.
same with the illustrative plan, that's not final, actually. That's going to get adjusted down the line.
Yeah.
So,
I would love to have a way of polling the people who come.
Well, those are the questionnaires, and so,
Right, and my central question I want to ask them is, how important is additional tax revenue to you, as opposed to, possibly having commercial development in the town that increases traffic, has some environmental consequences? It's quite clear the abutters place a lot more weight on the environment than they do on the tax revenue. And,
Well, that's who's going to be at the meeting.
what?
That's who's going to, the majority of the people at the meeting will be the abutters.
Yeah, unfortunately. I sort of would like to see how
You'll be,
the non-abutters feel about this.
right.
well, I think the
Because some
seminary,
of them have expressed opinions to me that, oh, I moved here because it was, what does it say on the town website, a suburban rural town? And, why do we have to have factories and biolabs and other things? I don't know how important people think that is.
well, that was the question I asked, because we've always said we want to balance social, environmental, and fiscal. And so you ask people, do you agree with that? And if no, how would you rank them in importance? Some people might say the fiscal part of it is the most important, other would say the environmental, and the dog walkers might say the social. So it's hard to say, but I think if we can tailor some really thoughtful questions, we might get some really good answers to
Or
help
maybe you
us.
gave them some kind of choice. So
Right.
here's option A. You get 300,000 square feet of biolabs, and you add $2 million, $1.5 million a year to the town budget. Or you build some kind of housing, and you get half as much tax revenue,
But it's beautiful.
but no traffic, or whatever, right?
So
So you
I'm
kind of like
hoping
gauge based on that.
Get some pictures,
Get some-
like
yeah,
of the
some-
boulders
something
and
that-
something visual.
I mean, I understand the abutters are going to come out one way on this, but if
Right.
we should pose it.
The other thing that needs to come up that's very central is understanding beyond tax revenue that, and I think we misstepped here, talking about using the word density, and I think Emil would correct us and say what that really means is compactness. And when you have something compact, the benefit is you get open space. So in other words, you take a certain amount of development and you keep it compact, and then you have open space that now the dog walkers, the abutters, the buffer, all that's in place. And so what we need to do is educate on what density really means. It means compactness, which equals meaningful, usable open space, open to all.
Right.
And so that's another key feature, not just do you want tax dollars or do you want open space? It's that if we have some control over this and don't just sprawl all over the site with 1 acre zoning, you will have public access. Is that desirable?
Right. No, I think, and we can show that. And the other thing, obviously, we're hampered to some extent by the absence of some real critical studies, like traffic studies, because right now, the roadways are one way, but it's conceivable that if there was egress and ingress from Bridge Street and Essex, it might ameliorate the traffic. Or if the traffic was oriented in such a way that those people going to the upper campus had one route of go and the lower campus another, the traffic could be handled. That's not my area of expertise. I couldn't even begin to address it, but a traffic study, oh, and the consultants did do this to some extent, and we can look at that. But a real traffic study could be helpful.
I have two quick questions. Are we gonna ask the seminary to do any kind of presentation at any of these?
This is for the planning board.
This is
This
for-
meeting's for the planning board.
I didn't know if we had any plans.
But this is a public meeting with more space than what's here in the
Correct.
memorial room. And so the seminary is certainly welcome to come and
I just didn't know if there was like 5-minute, like this, building relationships or just, I don't know, just maybe settling down some of the, letting people know what their intent is, or I don't know.
Well,
I was just thinking-
I'm hoping that the meeting that we have in the library is forward-looking. I mean, the past is the past. We have the information we have, and the abutters, I know some have felt that they have been excluded from the process, but I'm hoping that they look at this as now we're part of the process and everybody can start afresh without any, looking back and saying, but I didn't know, or this, that, or the
So
other.
that's
Let's
my
just
second
go.
question is, what are we gonna do for advertising? Are we gonna be proactive, and are we gonna do more than just putting it on the website? Are we gonna put it on like the Hamilton Wenham Facebook page, or like, what do we, you did a bunch of stuff with the sidewalk thing. I'm wondering if that's something we wanna do as a board to solicit more people to come? Or are we just, what do we?
The date of our meeting Tuesday, what's the date?
May 16th.
No, the
Oh, next week?
Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Oh,
Next Tuesday is the 9th.
the 9th.
Ninth.
Second?
9th.
9th. Yeah, so maybe we should discuss that at this,
The next meeting.
our next meeting is, what is the outreach? Because, we can't rely on, because all the websites are reactive, not proactive, and we need to drive,
If we're looking for
we
more
need to
input.
drive participation beyond just the abutters to the greatest extent we can.
Well, you just did this for the
Right.
HDC, and you had a few, I'm trying to recall what you actually put on Facebook. Was it just,
Oh, it was pictures, there were about, we did 6 every day, there was a different picture or a different message. We can figure that out.
okay, does anyone have any issues, questions, edits, additions, subtractions, corrections to the seminary timeline?
The who?
Seminary timeline.
Oh,
No.
yeah.
I think you did an excellent job. on
Yes,
that.
thank you.
Yeah, it was very clear.
And we could actually draw a lot from these exhibits for the
For the
presentation.
presentation.
Yeah.
And so, Patrick, you'll note when I did the exhibits for the most part, to help you find them, I indicated when you sent them to us, the date and the time, so it should make it pretty easy. If you don't do it personally, if you give it to someone else, they should be able to find these materials really quickly, although some are already up on the website, but,
I'd indicated to Patrick I would help him in terms of I think we have to position this whole thing where I think it's easy to look at the column that says, well, what did the consultants provide? What did the planning board do? What was the timeline? What was the topic? Instead of doing a chronological list.
oh, yeah.
It needs to be
I-
organized by author,
Yes, that's the way
organized by
I
author.
absolutely
organize it.
organized by
Or
author.
you could do date and then the exhibit,
Yeah.
the next date and the exhibit, so they don't have to keep going, oh, that date, and then I have to go find that exhibit.
Exactly, yeah.
It would be longer, but
It would be probably chronological for each of the authors. whether it's-
Actually, it is chronological
Yours
because,
is, yeah.
yeah, mine is, so
no, it is chronological.
it's chronological.
So, but putting it in a format so you can go
Integrated.
right to the information you're looking for.
Right.
We
It-
just need to make clear for the administrative assistant who does the web work for our
Yeah.
department, what you want and how you want it, you know, having her guess is not a good thing.
No, no. I just wonder if anybody has any ideas on what that could be, just
Yeah, no, I think
send it to,
take the time, it's gonna make it a longer document, but I think integrating it so people can actually read it, so you do, where there's an exhibit, you've got the date, it explains what happened, and it references an exhibit. That exhibit should follow, so they, as they're scrolling, they go, oh, okay, that's there, I don't need to read it, I'm going to the next piece of timeline, it is a possibility. Or there's a link that they can then click on, and it pops open the exhibit.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
A
So
hot link right in the prose, you're saying.
Right, so they don't have to like stop reading and go, okay,
Go hunt
where's
for
that
it.
exhibit?
Right.
Right.
And then they get distracted and they're just not gonna do it.
Right, so in the text itself, I have see Planning Board Exhibit 1, and if that were the link,
Yeah, it
they
needs,
could pop right on it.
right. So you put the link, they can click the link if they want, get a
Can
lot
they
of
do a hot link in the
information.
prose,
Or not.
Patrick? Can they
I
put a hot?
have no idea.
Okay,
I have no
so
idea how to
somebody
do
is
it
gonna have to
either.
ask them.
Might be able to.
Well, we have Bob Gates, right?
We do have Bob Gates. He can do Instagram, Facebook.
Well, I'm thinking
good
just
stuff
doing
for the meetings.
the structural organization of it.
Yeah, that's, you know, he's not the one who's gonna be entering this on the town's website.
Well, he won't.
No, he won't.
Okay. Does our administrative assistants know how to put links? It's not that hard.
Reasonably, that's why I say, you know, the more clear we can make things for her,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
better, because we don't want her
Okay.
having to mind read.
I would make the suggestion, timeline, exhibit reference, and right after that exhibit reference, a link. So if they choose, they can click on that link and go right to the exhibit to read more detail. If not, they just keep reading the timeline. Make sense?
Right,
Agreed.
So you're saying, don't, in terms of the authorship of that, you'd have to find the authorship through a link?
well, every link, every exhibit is preceded by the author, so I have Planning Board Exhibit 1, PB Exhibit 1.
No, I'm just trying to envision what, you're saying essentially replicate the timeline on the
Take
website?
the timeline as it is,
Yeah.
post it,
And
and
if you-
within the exhibit.
If somebody wants to see one of those items, they just click on
They
the,
just
Yeah.
click on it
Okay.
here.
just
instead of here.
Insert a link after the reference to the exhibit.
okay,
So if they choose to go to that for more detail, they can, or they just keep reading the
yeah,
timeline.
okay.
So they
And
don't
then-
have to go
yeah.
pull out of the timeline and then go try and find that.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah, that sounds good.
I know, switching gears here, Pat, that we wanted a bit of an update on the stormwater management.
Right.
You have 60 seconds, go. No, just kidding.
Alex is going to get an update for Thursday. I have my edits. We'll combine them, and then they can be presented to the board once they're combined. I think that's the best way to do it.
Could
So
you say
Thursday-
that again? I didn't hear you.
I was going to be getting the edits from Alex on
okay.
Thursday, and I'll combine what I've developed to present that back to the board.
Okay, yes, and
Well,
we'll,
we'll
we'll
do
have
that
to
then,
do
yeah.
that after May 16th. And then next Tuesday, we can also consider, since it's after 10 o'clock, Joe Demilovitz sent me an email. It's part of your package. He's indicating he is thinking of some kind of
Another public meeting.
another public meeting, and so the date of that is up in the air, and we should think about that at our next meeting. It's, so his memo to me is attached. I can tell you that I have a vacation planned in June. I'm leaving June 19th, and I am not coming back until June 26th. And so,
Do it before that, because everybody else is sort of dissipates.
right.
Right, it's school's still in
Yeah.
before that, so
Right.
that would make sense to
Right.
do it before. Probably the earlier of those dates that he has. I think you would- Just because I know at the end of school, there's a lot of year-end things, so people kids. You have young kids, don't you?
Do you have that attached?
Anything else?
I'm not gonna be able to make next Thursday. I'm in front of the board in Ipswich.
You're not going to be able to make what?
The meeting next Tuesday, I'll be in front of the board in Ipswich next Tuesday.
So you'll be on the other side of the table.
On the-
You're gonna get a beating.
I know, I do. That's why I came here.
Oh, this is tame in comparison.
Do their meetings last longer than ours?
No, it depends, it depends. They
Because
did
I'm
at,
thinking you could leave that meeting.
This isn't a planning, but this is in front of the select board. It's easy.
Oh.
But I wouldn't keep you from meeting. Unless if you felt like we didn't have enough time to be ready for the 16th.
Well, you know, if you don't attend the meetings, then you get charged with tasks.
I know,
and
that's
you
what I'm afraid
can't-
of.
You will be volunteered for several
Something. Oh, yeah. You'll
weeks in your absence.
think that, you'll think
Madam
this-
Chair, can I make a motion that we adjourn?
Yes, you certainly can.
Okay.
So when I
Before
call
we
your
do
name.
that, I would like to thank Emil for all the work he did on the use chart.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Emil,
thank you.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, anyway, did the motion get seconded?
No.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, I seconded.
Okay.
So when I call your name, please indicate that you were sent to the motion. Pat Norton,
Pat Norton, aye.
Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Porter, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth, her, aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
Thank you.
Away we go.
Recording stopped.